Chapter 648. Li Yundong felt the aura of the mystical silver fox flash away, and immediately took back his steps. For the time being, he couldn't figure out how to deal with the matter in front of him, and he didn't know who was watching Chow Kefi in the dark. Therefore he decided to hide in the dark so that it would be much more convenient to protect Chow Kefi. Xiaoyu looked at Li Yundong in surprise. "Don't you want to go up and say hello to President Chow? Aren't you in a hurry to find her?" Li Yundong thought like lightning and quickly thought of an excuse. He said to Xiaoyu with a mysterious and serious face, "Actually, there's one thing I didn't tell you." Xiaoyu asked in confusion, "What is it?" Li Yundong said very seriously, "I heard that someone was going to harm President Chow, so I rushed over. Now that I see that she's fine, I'm relieved for the time being. But I don't know if someone will do anything to her in the future, so I want to secretly observe and protect her for a period of time. I won't appear around her so as not to alert her." Xiaoyu suddenly became excited. "Wow, it's so exciting. Is someone trying to assassinate President Chow? Is it a crime of passion? Revenge? Or is it some kind of spy case? Wow, is President Chow a big spy? You're not a secret agent, are you?" Yes, I think you must be a secret agent. Otherwise, why did I see you so powerful last time? It's like 007. You must be an ace agent, right?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He held back his laughter, kept a straight face and said to Xiaoyu seriously, "Comrade Xiaoyu, I have something to tell you. Please keep it in mind." Xiaoyu couldn't help but be overjoyed. She was so excited that she couldn't control herself and said, "Tell me quickly. I have the best memory and the best mouth. I promise I'll still remember it after 100 years. I promise I won't tell anyone else." Li Yundong said with a serious face, "This sentence is, in the future watch less Hollywood blockbusters. You can almost be a screenwriter." Xiaoyu's face suddenly fell and she muttered, "Isn't it? What's the reason?" Li Yundong shook his head and ignored her. His eyes were still looking at Chow Kefi. At this time Chow Kefi didn't know these things. She was now painfully entangled with all kinds of fetters in the secular life. After she walked into the hotel, Lu Feier, who was not far from the door, quickly followed her and whispered, "Sister Chow, has that annoying guy left?" Chow Kefi sighed secretly and rubbed her temples with a painful expression. "Yes, unfortunately he will appear again in 2 days. Fortunately we can have 2 days of peace." Lu Feier also sighed and said sympathetically, "Sister Chow, you should have told me earlier. If I had known that you were so short of money, I could have helped you." Chow Kefi shook her head and said, "Forget it. You're an actor. Don't have this kind of financial relationship with him. Besides, it's not easy for you to make money." Lu Feier continued, "What about Director Yin? Isn't she your good friend?" Chow Kefi sighed her. "It's not like you don't know about the recent situation in the real estate industry. The country's crackdown on housing prices was unprecedentedly strict, and there was no strictest, only stricter. The capital chain of her current real estate company has long been broken. If it weren't for her uncle, Chen Wankai, who is helping her, I'm afraid she wouldn't have been able to hold on a long time ago." Lu Feier's family was well off, so she had never cared about these problems of the people's livelihood. She blinked her eyes and said, "Is that so? Then you didn't go to Zhou. Chow Kefi smiled bitterly. Ever since she took that little enemy as her master, she has become like her master. The last time I went to the courtyard to look for Zhou, they said that she hadn't been home for more than a month, as if she had married someone." At the mention of Li Yundong, Lu Feier's eyes suddenly lit up. After she and Chow Kefi entered the elevator, she said excitedly, "By the way, where is your little enemy Immortal Li? Why haven't I heard from him recently?" Since the last time she attended the opening ceremony of Desanxian, Lu Feier had conferred Li Yundong as a living immortal. She worshipped him very much, and more than once she had clamored to take him as her master. However, after Chow Kefi went to Desanxian several times and didn't see any trace of Li Yundong, and there was no news of him for a long time, Lu Feier's burning desire to take him as her master slowly cooled down. When Chow Kefi heard her mention Li Yundong, her face suddenly fell. She said with a face full of resentment, "How would I know? This guy is too hateful. Last time I finally got news of him and went to support him. I thought that after opening a shop, even if the monk ran away he wouldn't be able to run away. But I didn't expect that this guy is really cruel. He didn't even take care of the new shop and disappeared all day long. He's so hateful. I'm so angry." Lu Feier covered her mouth and said with a smile, "I think you can't stand it. You're alone in an empty room and your heart is stirred, right?" Chow Kefi blushed and glared at her. What nonsense are you talking about? Aren't you afraid that the reporters will eavesdrop on you and make gossip news the next day? Lu Fair giggled and said, well, it's a good time to hype it up. Maybe you'll become famous, Sister Chow. You might as well change your profession and become an actress. You're so beautiful. When the elevator door opened, the two men at the door saw Lu Fair wearing sunglasses and the gorgeous Chow Kefi at a glance. They couldn't help but be stunned, especially when their eyes fell on Chow Kefi. It was as if iron had met a magnet, and they couldn't move their eyes away. The two of them stood at the door in a daze, unable to walk. It wasn't until Chow Kefi and Lu Fair walked past them with their heads lowered and entered the room. They could no longer see them. Only then did they come to their senses. But when they turned around, they found that the elevator had been closed. Only then did they wake up as if they had just woken up from a dream and hurriedly pressed the elevator button. After Chow Kefi and Lu Fair entered the room, Lu Fair immediately burst out laughing. Sister Chow, look at how charming you are. Those two guys can't even walk. Come and act. You will definitely be the #1 sister in the film and television circle in China. Even Li Bingbing and Fan Bingbing have to give way. Chow Kefi said with a wry smile, you still say that I have a hard time being a producer. If I become an actress, won't I be ruined to death? Do you think I'm like you? If you want to make a film, you can make a film. If you don't want to make a film, no one can do anything to you. Lu Fair stuck out her tongue and said with a smile, no way. Sister Chow, if you don't want to be an actress, then don't be one. I just think that your life is too hard. Chow Kefi fell down on her big bed, pressed the jade pillow against her forehead, and said softly, yes, I've been dreaming these 2 days. When Lu Fair heard this, she became energetic. She sat beside Chow Kefi with her eyes shining. She shook her arm and urged, hey Sister Chow, what did you dream about? Did you dream about something that is not suitable for children? Chow Kefi put down her arm angrily, reached out and pinched Lu Fair. She said angrily, you damn girl, it's obvious that you are in love, but you blame it on me. Lu Fair giggled and dodged Chow Kefi's hand. Tell me, what's there to be embarrassed about? After playing with her for a while, Chow Kefi seemed to be very tired, so she continued to lie down on the soft bed and said faintly, alas, these days I always dream that I am in the forest. I am a carefree little fox and I don't have to deal with any messy people. When I am thirsty, I will drink the spring water in the mountain stream, and when I am hungry, I will eat the fruit falling from the tree. I have no worries about food and clothing, and I have no desires. Alas, how good this kind of life is. How can it be like now? All day long, for a little money, you beg your grandfather to sue your mother. Any man would want to take advantage of you. Lu Fair lay on the bed, holding her chin with her hands. Her 2 slender legs were raised high and swaying. She listened attentively and said leisurely, when I am thirsty, I will drink the spring water in the mountain stream. When I am hungry, I will eat the fruit falling from the tree. Oh, this life is really good, just like a paradise. Mr. Chow, when you are going to live in seclusion in the forest, take me with you. As she said this, she thought for a while and said, by the way, Sister Chow, I don't think you are a little fox. You are a big fox, the kind that has become a spirit. Otherwise, how could you be so beautiful? Chow Kefi couldn't help laughing. She slapped Lu Fair's butt and said, don't flatter me. I won't give you a raise even if you flatter me. Lu Fair giggled and said, I'm not. Sister Chow, don't you feel that you have become more and more beautiful these days? You seem to have become a different person. Your skin is getting better and better, your face is glowing, and you are extremely beautiful. Chow Kefi scolded with a smile, no, I'm going to become an old woman. Don't make trouble with me here. Go and do what you should do. However, Lu Fair rolled on the bed and said with a smile, no, I'll stay here with you tonight. It's boring for me to live in such a big room alone. I'll have a secret talk with you tonight. Chow Kefi and Lu Fair had a close personal relationship. Otherwise, she would not have taken Lu Fair with her when she went to the opening ceremony of Desanxian. Seeing that Lu Fair insisted on staying, she smiled helplessly and said, it's up to you. I'm going to take a bath. I don't care about you. I've been taking pictures of the sea for a whole day today. I'm exhausted. I smell like the sea. Lu Fair saw that Chow Kefi was talking and walking. She put her long wavy hair on her head with both hands. She propped up her upper body and said loudly, hey, don't turn off the hot water and don't close the door. I'll take a bath later. Chow Kefi scolded with a smile, you little girl, don't push your luck. Do you want to take advantage of me when you're taking a bath? After that, she closed the door with a bang. As if to deliberately anger Lu Fair, she also deliberately pressed the door lock with a click. She said proudly from inside, now you can't come in, can you? Lu Fair pretended to be angry and said, "Well, Sister Chow, you're too much. You don't believe me. Be careful that I take pictures of you with my mobile phone when I sleep at night, and then send the photos to the internet." Chow Kefi laughed and said, "Go ahead. Those who take pictures of others will also take pictures of others. Do you think you're the only one who has a mobile phone?" After that, she turned on the tap and prepared to take a shower. Chow Kefi stood in the spacious bathroom, taking off her clothes while looking at herself in the mirror on the dressing table. She saw that the beauty in the mirror really had a pair of seductive fox-like eyes, a small and exquisite oval face, especially bright and plump lips with neat snow-white teeth. It was really red lips and white teeth. When she smiled sweetly, it was thousands of kinds of amorous. Chow Kefi looked at herself in a daze for a while. She stretched out her fingers in front of the mirror and gently touched herself in the mirror. She sighed faintly and said, "You don't look worse than others. Why don't you like those who like you and those who you like don't like you?" Chow Kefi sighed softly, bit her red lips, and complained like a resentful woman, "I'm so annoying. Where did this little enemy go? She didn't even say hello. She has no conscience at all. She made me always bullied." Chow Kefi felt sorry for herself for a while. Then she went to the tap and took a hot bath. She sighed to herself and said, "Alas, it's really boring to be a human being. It's better to be a free little fox." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly heard a gloomy voice beside her. "Is what you said true? Do you really want to be a free little fox?" When Chow Kefi heard this voice, she was shocked. She wiped her face with her hand, trying to wipe the water off her face. After she wiped her face, she opened her eyes reluctantly and saw a vague figure standing in front of her, slowly reaching out to her. This was not a trivial matter. Chow Kefi was so scared that she screamed. She only felt a bone-chilling cold air blowing on her face. Her eyes darkened, and she fainted without saying a word. The Fox's Nest Supergroup, also known as Group 15, was already full of people. If anyone wanted to join the group, please join Group 16. 110241150. Chapter 649. Lu Fair, who was outside the door, heard a cry of alarm coming from the bathroom. She suddenly shivered and quickly jumped out of bed. She shouted to Chow Kefi, Sister Chow, what's wrong with you?" Lu Fair shouted nervously outside the door, but there was no movement in the bathroom, which frightened Lu Fair. Chow Kefi had had a lot of accidents before. With such a record, Lu Fair did not dare to be careless. She immediately rushed to the door, slammed it hard and shouted, "Sister Chow, can you speak?" She shouted, but there was still no response, so she put her ear to the door and listened carefully. But she only heard the sound of water coming from inside, and there was no other movement. Lu Fair gritted her teeth and quickly rushed to the bedside. She picked up a blanket and wrapped it around her body, head, and face. Then she took 2 steps back, shouted, and quickly hit the bathroom door. But the bathroom door was extremely strong, and Lu Fair was thin and slender. With a bang, the door did not move at all, but she staggered, took 2 steps back and sat on the ground. She felt as if her whole body had fallen apart. This burst of pain only made Lu Fair's tears keep rolling in her eyes, but she quickly gritted her teeth and stood up. She gritted her teeth and stretched out her neck in a righteous manner. Then she shouted and slammed into the door. Dong! This time, Lu Fair's body was directly pressed against the door, but the damn door still didn't budge. Lu Fair leaned her shoulder against the door and sat down softly on the ground. She covered her limp arms and painful shoulders with her hands. Looking at the door that seemed to be about to divide the yin and yang worlds, tears fell down her cheeks. She sobbed, "Help, who will save me?" She failed to hit the door twice, but she dislocated her arm. She was anxious and afraid, so she couldn't help crying loudly. After crying twice, she suddenly remembered, "Hurry up and call the police." Lu Fair seemed to have forgotten the pain. She quickly stood up and rushed to the bedside. She quickly grabbed her mobile phone with her remaining arm and dialed the phone in a hurry. But her hands were shaking so hard that she couldn't press the button on the phone. The more nervous Lu Fair was, the more afraid she became. She didn't know what was going on with Chow Kefi. She was in a state of fear that was on the verge of collapse. After pressing for a while, she couldn't even press the simplest 110, so she gave up, rushed to the door, opened it and shouted, "Help, help." Lu Fair was a professional actress, and her basic skills were extremely solid. When she shouted, almost the whole building heard her. The people in the rooms on the left and right poked their heads out when they heard the sound. 2 waiters hurriedly ran over and asked nervously, "What happened?" Lu Fair pointed to the bathroom and said with tears in her eyes, Sister Chow is inside. I called her but she didn't move. I don't know what's wrong. Hurry up and open the door. I'm afraid that something will happen to her. She has heart disease. The two waiters' faces turned pale when they heard this. Hotels were most afraid of this kind of thing. Moreover, people who stayed in such a hotel and lived in such a luxurious suite were not easy to deal with. If something went wrong here, it would be a big deal. A waiter quickly picked up his walkie-talkie and spoke to the receptionist, asking her to call the police immediately. The other waiter quickly rushed to the door and tried the door lock with his hand, only to find that it didn't budge at all. He immediately used his shoulder to knock the door, only to find that it didn't feel like a door at all, but a wall, a mountain. The waiter covered his shoulder, grimaced in pain and shook his head at the other waiter. At this time, the corridor had also attracted a lot of people to watch the fun. Some men saw Lu Feier, a great beauty, crying like a pear blossom in the rain, and they couldn't help but want to show off. They volunteered and said, "Let me do it, let me do it." One by one they rushed toward the bathroom door like soldiers, but without exception they were hit so hard that their heads were heavy and their feet were light. Their feet felt as if they were stepping on cotton, and they couldn't stand steadily. They staggered as if they were drunk. Seeing this scene, Lu Feier was so desperate that she cried. At this moment she suddenly heard a familiar voice. "What's wrong?" Lu Feier was stunned. She raised her head and saw a boy with thick eyebrows and bright eyes standing in front of her, looking at her with concern and nervousness. "Isn't this Li Yundong? Why is he here?" Lu Feier's mind buzzed and she thought subconsciously. But soon, Lu Feier came to her senses. She couldn't help but feel her heart pounding. She didn't know where she got the strength from, but she stood up and unconsciously reached out to grab Li Yundong. "Why are you here?" "That's great. Save Sister Chow. She. As she spoke, Lu Feier could not go on, and her tears kept falling. Li Yundong nodded and said to her in a deep voice, "Don't worry, I'm here." Lu Feier nodded and wiped away her tears. For some reason, it was as if after the boy in front of her said, "I'm here," she felt incomparably safe and secure, and the panic on her face slowly disappeared. The man who had hit the door and suffered internal injuries looked at Li Yundong with his head tilted and a look of disapproval on his face. He thought to himself, "There are so many of us. Some of us are stronger than you and some are taller than you. Can you do something if we can't do it?" Li Yundong walked to the door by himself and reached out to try the door lock. As soon as his hand touched the handle, he felt a bone-piercing cold demon chi. He immediately retracted his hand and frowned secretly. He thought to himself, "Oh no, could it be that the mystical silver fox has already taken back her soul?" Li Yundong took a deep breath and exerted a little force. He tried to use his pure and vigorous Yuanyang Jinqi to test the Yin Qi. As soon as he tried it, there was a bang and Li Yundong was shocked to take 3 steps back. Li Yundong didn't expect that the rebound force would be so strong. Although he didn't use his full strength, he was shocked to take 3 steps back in a row, which shocked him greatly. As soon as Li Yundong lowered his head, he saw that the palm of his hand holding the handle was covered with a layer of frost. It was obvious that it had been frozen by the cold chi just now. He thought to himself, "This mystical silver fox is really clever. She is strong when she meets the strong and weak when she meets the weak." Before, when ordinary people opened the door, she used ordinary strength to block the door. Now it's my turn to open the door, she used the cold chi to block me. You do have some skills, but can you stop me like this?" When some of the men around saw that Li Yundong had also suffered a loss at the door, they immediately sneered and gloated. But as soon as they laughed, they saw Li Yundong take a deep breath and walk to the door again. But this time, Li Yundong stretched out his hands not to push the door but to the wall next to the bathroom door. Everyone was shocked and terrified. They thought to themselves, "Is this guy crazy? Does he think he is Schwarzenegger the Terminator?" But as soon as this thought flashed through their minds, they saw Li Yundong's palms touch the wall. Suddenly the wall rumbled and the wall was like tofu dregs made of flour. With a crash, a big hole appeared. Everyone was stunned and speechless for a long time. They watched helplessly as Li Yundong opened a door in the wall next to him with his bare hands. Then he rushed into the bathroom. As soon as Li Yundong rushed into the bathroom, he saw that Chow Kefi's eyes were closed, and he didn't know whether she was dead or alive. She leaned against the tile wall of the bathroom, naked and curled up into a ball. Although her hands and feet were covered, her pink body was as delicate as porcelain jade, which was extremely irritating and made people have a nosebleed. Li Yundong quickly looked away and searched around the bathroom vigilantly. After quickly confirming that there was no aura of the mystical silver fox around, he took off his upper clothes and gently picked her up. When the two of them touched, Li Yundong tested Chao Kefi's blood with the aura of his body, only to find that Chao Kefi's body was no different from that of an ordinary person. However, the original loss of qi and blood in her body had greatly improved, which made Li Yundong stunned. Logically speaking, Chao Kefi was a woman without a soul. She only had her life spirit, Tianchong, spiritual wisdom and central core, which were one soul and three physical forms. Therefore, her congenital incompleteness led to a lack of qi and blood. It was impossible to make up for it. This was like a woman with 5 leaks. If she didn't make up for the 5 leaks and went to cultivate, it would be absolutely impossible for her to succeed. However, at this time, Chao Kefi's whole body was full of qi and blood, as if her soul had been made up. But if the mystical silver fox had already entered Chao Kefi's body, then Chao Kefi should have been full of jinqi at this time. It was impossible for her to be like this without any jinqi at all. Li Yundong frowned and thought to himself, this is really strange. It doesn't make sense. After he carried Chao Kefi out of the bathroom, he was thinking about the problem when he saw Lu Feier quickly wiping her tears and coming up to him. She asked nervously, "How is it? Is Sister Chao okay?" Li Yundong nodded and said with a strange expression, "It seems that she's fine, but..." Lu Feier quickly asked nervously, "But what?" Li Yundong looked down at Chao Kefi and saw that the beauty in his arms was sleeping with her eyes closed. Although her body was covered by her clothes, others still stared at the place covered by her clothes, as if they wished they had a pair of eyes that could see through things and could see what kind of amazing beauty was hidden under the clothes. Li Yundong put Chao Kefi on the bed and covered the bed sheet. He stared at Chao Kefi's beautiful and quiet face and fell into deep thought. He thought to himself, "But I don't know whether she is Chao Kefi or the mystical silver fox now." Chapter 650. The accident that had happened in the hotel really made the staff break out in a cold sweat. The manager on duty quickly rushed to the scene of the accident and apologized to Lu Feier and the others. He didn't even pursue the matter of the damage to the room. He just hoped that the other party would not take advantage of it and take them to court. Fortunately, Lu Feier was not a shrewd person who bullied others. When she heard that Chao Kefi was fine, she felt relieved. She pointed to the door and said to the manager on duty, who was smiling apologetically, "It's good that she's fine. Sister Chao needs to rest now. Please let them disperse quickly." The manager on duty took a look and saw that the corridor was already crowded with people. There were curious eyes everywhere. Many people were looking back and forth at Chao Kefi, but more people were looking at the big hole in the wall in amazement. They whispered to each other, "Isn't this too exaggerated? Is this wall made of flour? How could it be pushed away with one palm?" "That's right. It makes me think I'm watching the Terminator." Tisk tsk, maybe the other party is a humanoid Terminator? Damn, I'm Ultraman. Crazy, do you think you're in the country of light? Stop arguing. In my opinion, it must be a jerry-built project. Otherwise, how could it be possible to push down the wall with one palm? That's right. It's not safe to stay in this hotel. The manager on duty was a little flustered when he heard everyone talking at once. He knew that if the news that Xian State Hotel was a jerry-built project spread out, it would be a big deal. He would definitely lose his job. He hurriedly said, "Please rest assured. Our Xian State Hotel is a 5-star hotel. The quality is absolutely first class in the country. Don't worry. If you don't believe me, you can go to the edge of the wall and have a look. If it's a jerry-built project, we will immediately check out for you and return you double the money." When everyone heard this, they curiously leaned over to take a look at the wall. They saw that the wall was all made of solid bricks. Someone touched the edge of the broken wall with his hand. With a little force, he felt that the bricks were stiff. Not to mention pushing with his hand, even if he hit it with a hammer, he might not be able to make a hole. Everyone was shocked and looked at Li Yundong in unison. They couldn't understand how Li Yundong's body, which was not very strong, could hide such a terrible power. They took a deep breath and thought to themselves, "Is he really the Terminator?" At this time, Xiaoyu, who had come with Li Yundong, was proud. She showed off and said, "Hey, that's my friend. I came with him. Do you want to know who he is?" Someone asked curiously, "Who is he?" Xiaoyu looked proud. It's a secret. I can't tell you." Seeing Xiaoyu's mysterious look, these people had a look of understanding on their faces. "Oh, I see." Some people even took out their mobile phones to secretly take pictures of Li Yundong, so that they could upload them to the internet later to show off the negotiation. Li Yundong turned around and glared at Xiaoyu, then said to Lu Feier, "It's too noisy here. It's not good for President Chao's rest. Can we go somewhere else? Lu Fei'er immediately said to the manager on duty, "Did you hear that? Hurry up and change our room." The manager on duty immediately said, Okay, I'll arrange it right away." After that, he carefully looked at Chow Kefi and said tentatively, "Are you sure you really don't need to send her to the hospital? If anything goes wrong." If something went wrong, he couldn't afford to take the responsibility, nor could the hotel. Lu Fei'er naturally understood the subtext of the manager on duty. She looked at Li Yundong and had completely regarded this boy, who was a little younger than her, as the backbone. Although Li Yundong was guessing Chow Kefi's current identity in his heart, he didn't show the slightest worry on his face. He knew that if he panicked, he didn't know how panicked the girl would be. He calmly smiled at Lu Fei'er and said, "No, I'm here. There's no need to send her to the hospital." Lu Fei'er immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said to the manager on duty, "No, just arrange another room for us." The manager on duty looked at Li Yundong in embarrassment. But heat. The subtext of the manager on duty was very obvious. Who is this boy? Does he mean what he said? Something goes wrong, who should we look for? Li Yundong knew what he was thinking. He nodded to him and said with a smile, "Don't worry. If I say it's okay. You can go. There are so many people here who can testify." Li Yundong had been cultivating for a long time, and gradually the temperament of a master on his body became more and more obvious. He was calm in the face of danger, calm in the chaos, and calm in front of him. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, his face would not change. Even if he was surrounded by a group of masters in Mount Koya, the nest of the Japanese cultivation world, his heart was still beating as usual and he was walking leisurely. His smile seemed to have an inexplicable power, which made the anxious lobby manager calm down and feel an inexplicable sense of trust. The lobby manager smiled and said, "Since you say so, I won't force you. I'll arrange a new room for you." He walked to the door and said loudly, "Please go back. It's okay. Let the patient have a good rest." Only then did everyone whisper to each other and leave. The lobby manager looked back at Li Yundong. For a moment he remembered Li Yundong's tone and expression when he spoke just now. He couldn't help but think to himself, this boy is young, but his aura is really not small. Is he really a great mysterious person? He didn't dare to neglect it. He quickly replaced Chow Kefi's original luxury business room with a luxury salon room with a sea view, and claimed that the original rent would still be charged, in order to express the compensation of the new state guesthouse. After Li Yundong and the others changed their rooms, they found that the room had changed from the original 48 square meters to 62 square meters. Moreover, as soon as they opened the curtains, they could see the beautiful sea view of the beach on holiday. Lu Fei'er was used to this kind of world, so she didn't feel it. Li Yundong stood by the window and looked out. He could see the blue sea and blue sky, which stretched as far as the eye could see. His mind suddenly became much broader, as if his breath was much smoother, and the qi flowing in his body also became stronger. He couldn't help but think to himself, this is really a treasure place for immortals. I wonder what kind of great cultivation sects are in Hainan? If I set up a cultivation sect here and use it as my base camp, absorbing the qi of the sea and the sky every day, my cultivation progress will not be worse than that of the Taoist priests of Mount Longhu. Lu Fei'er saw Li Yundong standing at the window with his back to her. Although she couldn't see the boy's expression, the boy's straight back, broad shoulders, and his motionless figure made her have an illusion in an instant. Standing in front of her was an old man who was already dozens of years old. His imposing manner made her feel that she had never seen many senior officials and martial arts masters. Lu Fei'er held her head and looked at Li Yundong curiously. She secretly speculated about Li Yundong's true identity. The more she guessed, the more she felt that this boy, who looked too young and was frighteningly mature, was too mysterious. He could even be described as unfathomable. He was like a black hole. Anyone who approached him would have a strong curiosity about him and be sucked in by him. After guessing for a long time, Lu Fei'er couldn't help but look at Chow Kefi. She sighed faintly in her heart and thought to herself, these days excellent men are always scarce resources. Alas, even a beautiful woman like President Chow doesn't pay attention to him. I have no hope. Last time when the Desanxian opened, I saw a group of beautiful women around this guy. He doesn't seem to be an infatuated lover. Why doesn't he like President Chow? Lu Fei'er was thinking like a little girl. While she was lost in thought, she heard a weak voice coming from beside her. Excuse me, is there anything I can do for you? When Lu Fei'er heard this voice, she came to her senses. Only then did she notice that Xiaoyu was still standing next to her. She asked in confusion, You are? Xiaoyu smiled embarrassedly and said, I'm an employee of President Chao. I'm here to report my work to her and I brought Li Yundong here on the way. He said that he had something urgent to discuss with President Chao. Lu Fei quickly stood up and said enthusiastically, I see. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid that Sister Chao would have been in danger today. Sit down, sit down. Xiaoyu was also very sensible. Seeing this scene, she quickly waved her hand and said with a smile, forget it, I'll get a room for myself first. When President Chao wakes up and reports to her, I'll go back first. Lu Fei didn't stop her. She said with a smile, well, come over more often when you're free. Seeing that a big star like Lu Fei was so approachable, Xiaoyu also said with a smile, okay, I'll ask you for your autograph later. Lu Fei pursed her lips and said with a smile, no problem. I'll sign a double for you. Xiaoyu chuckled and walked to the door. As soon as she opened the door and was about to go out, she saw a man pounce on her, panting and shouting, President Chao, where's President Chao? Is she all right? Xiaoyu took a closer look and immediately frowned secretly. Who else could it be but Zhao Yuzhen? Xiaoyu knew that a white-collar worker at her level couldn't afford to offend a boss like Zhao Yuzhen. She thought to herself, I'd better let them meet each other lest I, a white-collar worker, suffer when the immortals fight. Xiaoyu's face was full of smiles. She pretended to be surprised and said, President Zhao, why are you here? Hearing Xiaoyu's exclamation, Lu Fei looked at the door and immediately frowned. She thought to herself, this annoying guy's nose is really sharp. How could he know that something had happened to President Chao? Could it be that he has spies in the crew? Yes, it must be so. No wonder he has been able to block us these days. Go back and let me know who it is. I'll teach him a lesson. But no matter how much she hated this person in her heart, she still had to save face. After all, he was an investor, wasn't he? Lu Fei stood up with a warm face and said with a smile, President Zhao, you're here? Please sit down and come in for a glass of water. Zhao Yuzhen looked worried. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and said with a smile, I heard that something had happened to President Chao, so I rushed over. I was scared to death. How is it? Is President Chao all right? While he was talking, his eyes searched for Chao Kefi in the room, but he soon saw Chao Kefi lying quietly on the bed, covered with a quilt, and her slender eyelashes quietly covered her eyes, as if she had fallen asleep. Just as Zhao Yuzhen was about to approach, he suddenly saw a familiar figure standing beside the French window. The man turned around and said to him with a fake smile, President Zhao, we meet again. Isn't this Li Jiandong? Zhao Yuzhen was so scared that his legs and stomach began to tremble. He almost collapsed on the spot, as if all the dirty thoughts in his stomach had been seen through by the young boy in front of him. His face turned pale and he couldn't help stepping back as he said, Ah, it's young Master Li. It's a pleasure to meet you. Last time when Desanxian opened, we parted at the opening ceremony. Young Master Li, you're still as elegant as ever. Zhao Yuzhen was afraid that Li Jiandong would remember the past, so he was so scared that he couldn't even speak clearly. After stammering for a while, he looked around and quickly said to Lu Fei, since young Master Li is here, it's good. I still have something to do. I'll go first. After that, he left as if he was running for his life. Seeing that he had admitted defeat, Li Jiandong was no longer aggressive. He just smiled and turned around. Lu Fei was overjoyed when she saw that Li Yundong had scared the guy away with just one sentence. She grabbed Li Yundong's arm and said, Oh, you're really amazing. You drove this annoying guy away with just one sentence. This guy has annoyed us to death these days. We can't get rid of him no matter how hard we try. You're about to catch up with the door god. By the way, Immortal Li, why don't you come to our crew to take care of your President Chao and help us block these monsters? Chapter 651. Hearing Lu Fei's words, Li Yundong couldn't help but have an idea. He thought to himself, she's right. Anyway, I've been exposed now. I might as well use this excuse to stay with Chao Kefi and wait and see. It's also convenient for me to deal with it. Devour thinking of this, Li Yundong nodded and smiled. Well, I'm afraid I'll disturb you. Lu Fei was overjoyed. She subconsciously wanted to raise her hand and cheer, but as soon as she raised her hand, she felt a sharp pain in her arm. She groaned in pain, covered her arm and almost sat down. Only then did she remember that her arm was still dislocated. She had been too nervous and scared just now and had forgotten about it. Li Yundong supported her, looked at her arm, reached out and gently pinched her shoulder, asking, Does it hurt? At this time, Lu Fei had completely relaxed. There was no more worry or fear in her heart. For a moment she felt that the pain was simply unbearable. Cold sweat rolled down her forehead, and she reluctantly nodded. Li Yundong said softly, "Don't be afraid. I'll help you put your arm back." Lu Feier's face turned pale. "Will it hurt?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "No, just cooperate." As he said this, he slowly lifted Lu Feier's dislocated arm. Although it was late winter, the temperature in Haikao, Hainan was still very hot. Lu Feier was wearing a sleeveless silk dress at this time, and her armpits were shaved clean. Although this was not a private part of a person, Lu Feier felt inexplicably shy. Her cheeks were flushed and her heart was pounding. She didn't know what this boy wanted to do. Li Yundong seemed to know what Lu Feier was thinking. He smiled and said, "Don't be nervous." As he said this, he raised Lu Feier's dislocated arm and flicked the Jichuan acupoint under Lu Feier's armpit with the finger of his other hand. Lu Feier's bones were only dislocated, and her meridians and qi were not obstructed. Therefore, Li Yundong's flicking immediately made her whole body tremble, as if she had been struck by electricity. From the Jichuan acupoint in her armpit to the Yongquan acupoint in her feet, she almost lost consciousness in an instant. After the flick, Li Yundong immediately grabbed Lu Feier's shoulder with one hand and pushed her arm into the joint with the other. With a crack, Lu Feier's arm was sent back into the distance. Lu Feier heard the terrible sound and was about to scream when he said to her with a smile, "How is it? Does it hurt?" Lu Feier was surprised to find that her arm had recovered. She waved her arm and said with an exaggerated expression, "It doesn't hurt. It's amazing. How did you do that? You seem to have pressed once and I lost all feeling in my body. Is this the body-fixing art of the immortal technique? Or a paralysis spell in magic?" Li Yundong couldn't help but laugh. "You've watched too many movies. Don't guess randomly. This is a traditional Chinese medicine method. You can find any traditional Chinese medicine doctor and they can explain it to you." The Jichuan acupoint was one of the important acupoints of the human body. It was located at the apex of the armpit, and the axillary artery was on the outside. There were a large number of nerve veins around the acupoint, such as the ulnar nerve, the median nerve, and the cutaneous nerve on the inside of the forearm. It could be said that this was the central passage connecting the human body and the arm. It was an extremely developed and sensitive place. At this time, Li Yundong could be called a great expert in cultivation. He used his powerful and condensed jinqi to explore Lu Feier's Jichuan acupoint. It was like pricking her acupoint with a golden needle. As the saying goes, pull one hair and the whole body will move. As soon as Li Yundong pricked it, the jinqi immediately flowed to every part of her body, controlled her nerves and made her feel numb in an instant. Lu Feier widened her eyes as if she didn't believe Li Yundong's explanation, but she couldn't find a better way to explain it. She could only sigh in her heart. Zhao Yuzhen, who had wanted to leave as soon as possible, stopped to listen because he clearly heard Lu Feier's criticism of him after he went out. It would have been better if he hadn't listened, but as soon as he heard it, he was so ashamed and angry that his face turned green and white. He wished that there would be a crack on the ground for him to crawl into. In this world, there was nothing more infuriating than a beautiful woman attacking him in front of a man. Zhao Yogan's original fear turned into anger. After he rushed out of the hotel door, he felt as if there was a raging fire in his chest. He wanted to find someone to vent his anger and take revenge on. This Li Yundong, why does he follow me wherever I go? Why does he always make things difficult for me? Zhao Yuzhen had been humiliated, so he subconsciously transferred this anger to Li Yundong. However, he couldn't beat this boy. The painful lesson of Desanxian last time was still fresh in his mind. Who dared to touch a person who could talk cordially with the top leader of the provincial party committee? Did the old man eat arsenic? Are you tired of living? While he was feeling agitated, he suddenly heard a surprised voice coming from beside him. It was a woman with a strong London accent. She said in English, "Ah, Mr. Zhao, hello. I didn't expect to see you here." Zhao Yuzhen turned his head and saw a woman about 1.7 meters tall with brown hair, blue eyes, deep eyes and a high nose. She looked quite sexy and coquettish. She was looking at him with a smile, and her eyes were full of seduction and ambiguity. Zhao Yuzhen knew that this woman's name was Justin. She came from London, England, and graduated from a second-rate university in England. Although she was not born in a good family, Justin had a fiery Hollywood dream since she was a child. At the age of 16, she went to Los Angeles to pursue her movie dream. However, there was no shortage of beautiful gold diggers and dream chasers in Hollywood. Justin had been wandering in Hollywood for 10 years and had played many small roles, but she had never been able to get the chance to rise to the top. Foreign women matured early and aged quickly. Although a woman was at her peak at the age of 26, the hustle and bustle of Vanity Fair made her look a little tired, which made Justin feel an inexplicable sense of panic and fear. Just as she was feeling anxious, she heard her friend talk about the Red Country in the Far East, which made her think of an idea. Although the film industry in this Red Country started late, it has developed rapidly in recent years. The annual box office has ranked 5th in the world, and the momentum of growth is extremely rapid. In less than 2 years, it will definitely surpass Japan and become the second largest film market in the world. In this case, why don't I go to this distant country first to try my luck? Doesn't the whole world say that Chinese people are rich? Some of her good friends who had gone to China to make money had also sent her text messages. People are stupid, but they have a lot of money. Come quickly. Justin was a woman who did what she thought. She immediately packed her luggage and came to this country that she knew almost nothing about. When she arrived, she realized that she was blind and knew almost nothing. Her dream of making a fortune in a blockbuster suddenly became a little out of reach. Even after being cheated by the shell companies in the film and television industry several times, Justin's 3 meals a day had become a problem. In this situation, she accidentally received a TV series project that Chow Kefi was working on. Although it was said that filmmakers always despise TV series, many Hollywood actors refused to go back to make TV series after making movies. Although Justin was not a big star, she still had a movie on her resume. Although it was a small role, no matter how small the supporting role was, it was still a supporting role. Don't play a small role. However, the reality was cruel. Justin, whose heart was higher than the sky and her life was thinner than paper, was forced by the current situation. She obediently restrained her arrogance and obediently began to shoot TV series. But even so, from time to time, Justin would reveal the so-called big-name habits in the crew, as if the third-rate actors from Hollywood were a bit higher than the first-rate actors in this country. It was also because of this that many people in the crew did not like this foreign girl. However, due to the fame of Hollywood and her decent acting skills, everyone pinched their noses and endured it. After acting for a while, Justin found that the person who could really speak in this crew was actually a woman who was so beautiful that it made one's hair stand on end. The men's skills that she had honed in Hollywood's Vanity Fair were actually useless here. According to Justin's own script, it would be, she would endure to shoot 1 or 2 TV series first, then seduce 1 or 2 rich and powerful China tycoons, and make them willingly invest in a movie for her. Maybe with her beauty and strength, she would become famous overnight? But what if the target of seduction was a woman who was much more beautiful than her? Lala? Lily? Lace? Justin, who had a normal sexual orientation, was unexpectedly depressed and angry. It was fine that the boss in the crew was a woman, but she was actually a woman who was more beautiful than her. This was really intolerable. Fortunately, the crew soon became short of funds. The plot that Justin had dreamed of finally appeared. A rich man had finally arrived. Ever since Zhao Yuzhen had appeared, Justin had been intentionally or unintentionally getting close to him. It was really true that her heart shone on the bright moon, but Zhao Yogan's hot blood had been sprinkled on Chow Kefi. However, the bright moon shone on the ditch. Even so, Justin still did not give up. She held the spirit of an internationalist mistress that as long as she wielded the hoe well, there was no corner that she could not dig up, and launched attacks on Zhao Yuzhen one after another. Of course, Zhao Yuzhen also knew Justin's idea. At this time he was full of anger. At a glance, when he saw the foreign woman who kept showing off to him, he couldn't help but feel his stomach move. He thought to himself, Chow Kefi, this fragrant beauty can't be eaten. It seems that it's not bad to satisfy my hunger with this foreign woman. Thinking of this, Zhao Yuzhen couldn't help but smile and reply in English, "It turns out to be Miss Justin. What's wrong? Have you just finished shooting?" Although Zhao Yogan's character was not very good, he was a returnee who had studied abroad and received an MBA. Although his English had a strong Chinese accent, it was not a problem for him to communicate with Qin Haodong. Justin saw that Zhao Yogan's eyes were a little different from usual when he looked at her. There was something unique to men in his eyes. As a woman who had been rolling in the Vanity Fair for a long time, she naturally knew what he was thinking. Justin was delighted and her eyes became more and more charming. She said, "Yes, it's really hot. Mr. Zhao, why are you here? Would you like to have dinner together?" Zhao Yuzhen said with a smile, "Okay. I also want to have a romantic dinner with Miss Kesting." When Justin saw that Zhao Yuzhen emphasized the word romantic, she immediately knew that this big fish was going to take the bait. She was overjoyed and said with a flattered face, "Oh my God, this is the best news I've heard since I came to China. It's my honor to have dinner with such an elegant man like you." After hearing this compliment, Zhao Yuzhen suddenly felt elated. The anger he had suffered from Li Jiandong, Chao Kefi, and Lu Feier seemed to disappear in an instant. He pretended to be modest proudly and said, "Don't mention it. It's also my honor to have dinner with such a beautiful and intellectual lady like you." After the two people who had their own evil intentions and were thinking of each other, pretended to be polite to each other, and rushed to a nearby French restaurant as if they were a couple. After sitting down, it didn't take long for them to exchange pleasantries before Justin started talking non-stop. She kept complaining about her miserable experience in China and her rough fate. She kept crying along the way looking very pitiful. Zhao Yuzhen listened patiently and pretended to comfort her. But when he heard what Justin said, he suddenly pricked up his ears and quickly asked, "What did you just say?" Justin wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with a silk handkerchief and raised her head in a daze. "Which sentence?" Zhao Yuzhen leaned forward slightly and said with a serious face, "You said you don't want to do it anymore?" Justin immediately complained again, "Yes, I'm a Hollywood actor. How can I act in such a low-class TV series in such a place? Although I'm the protagonist, I have so few scenes. This crew is really rubbish. From the producer to the director, for God's sake, it's a compliment for me to say that they are rubbish. They are simply useless. If you hadn't appeared in time like a savior, the crew would have even fallen apart." Zhao Yogan's heart skipped a beat. He slowly leaned back on the chair, and a malicious smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He couldn't help turning his head to look in the direction of the Xian Hotel. His eyes were cold as he smiled. "Humph, Chao Kefi, Lu Feier, and Li Jiandong, you don't make me feel better, so I won't make you feel better." Chapter 652. Just as Zhao Yuzhen was about to play dirty tricks, Chao Kefi had already woken up. The beautiful woman groaned, her eyelashes trembling slightly. She opened her eyes and asked, "Where am I?" "Sister Chao, are you awake?" Lu Feier was overjoyed. She rushed to the bedside and stared at Chao Kefi with wide eyes. Chao Kefi looked at Lu Feier and tried to sit up with her hands. She forced a smile on her face and said, "It's you? What's wrong with me?" Lu Feier quickly helped her up and said quickly, "Oh, Sister Chao, you fainted when you were taking a bath. It was so dangerous. I thought you had a heart attack." Chao Kefi said blankly, "Ah? I had a heart attack again? No way, I took my medicine today." While she was talking, she heard a familiar boy's voice coming from beside her. "You didn't faint because of a heart attack." Chao Kefi turned her head and saw Li Yundong standing not far from the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on her. Chao Kefi was surprised and happy. "What are you doing here?" Before Li Yundong could speak, Lu Feier said with a smile, "Sister Chao, if it weren't for Li Yundong, you would be in danger again. He saved you once again." "Hey Sister Chao, you didn't see that Li Yundong almost demolished this building to save you. The hotel manager on duty came to apologize to us and asked us to change rooms. It was so funny." "Hey Sister Chao, I'm talking to you Sister Chao." At first, Chao Kefi was still listening to Lu Feier, but gradually her attention was focused on the boy in front of her. She suddenly had a feeling that every time she was in trouble or danger, the boy would appear. He was like a cloud, floating in the distant sky. At the beginning he could still touch him, but slowly he floated higher and higher, becoming more and more untouchable. Chao Kefi saw the concern, worry, and even a trace of hidden vigilance in Li Yundong's eyes, especially when she saw him standing 2 steps away from the bed and not approaching. Although she didn't know why Li Yundong was guarding against her, Chao Kefi, who was good at observing people's words and expressions, felt her heart ache. The joy of seeing Li Yundong couldn't help but dilute a lot. She reluctantly smiled at Li Yundong and said, "I'm sorry to have caused you trouble again." Li Yundong shook his head and said with a smile, "Don't mention it." Lu Feier raised her head and suddenly asked curiously, "By the way Li Yundong, I haven't asked you yet. Why are you here?" Li Yundong chuckled. "I can predict the future. I felt that something bad might happen to President Chao, so I rushed here." Lu Feier covered her mouth and exclaimed, "Is it that exaggerated? Are you really a half-immortal?" Chao Kefi looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes and said faintly, "He is not a half-immortal. He is obviously a full immortal, a transcendent immortal. When he is in a good mood he will come down to the world to meet us mortals. When he is in a bad mood he will be free and unfettered. Lu Fair could hear the strong resentment in Chow Kefi's tone. She secretly stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to answer. Instead, she looked at Li Yundong with some schadenfreude, wanting to see how he would deal with it. Li Yundong smiled bitterly. He didn't answer Chow Kefi's words. Instead, he changed the topic and asked, "How are you feeling now? What's wrong with you?" Seeing that Li Yundong didn't answer her, Chow Kefi felt even more bitter in her heart. She couldn't help but say angrily, "I'm fine. Go back to your immortal world. The human world is very dangerous. It's not safe for you to stay here." Li Yundong smiled and said, "How do you know that the immortal world is safer than the human world?" Chow Kefi glared at Li Yundong and said, "If that's not the case, why are you so far away from me? Can I eat you?" From the moment Chow Kefi woke up, Li Yundong had been carefully observing her. He wanted to see whether she was Chow Kefi or the mystical silver fox. But after observing for a long time, Li Yundong found that Chow Kefi's words and deeds, voice and smile were no different from before. It didn't seem that her soul had been taken away by her at all. Li Yundong couldn't help but be surprised. He knew that if the mystical silver fox had already entered Chow Kefi's body and snatched her soul, then the one who was speaking at this time should be the mystical silver fox's disguise. But no matter how similar a person's disguise was, it was impossible for her to speak in the same tone and expression. Besides, the mystical silver fox had been sealed for nearly 1,000 years. How could she disguise herself as a modern person as soon as she came out? Could it be that the mystical silver fox didn't possess President Chow? Li Yundong thought to himself. He took a step forward with a smile and said to Chow Kefi, "President Chow, you really like to joke. I've booked a room near your room. If you feel uncomfortable or have something to do, just call me. I'll be right there." As he said this, he fled like he was running away. Chow Kefi looked at his fleeing figure. She was so angry that she picked up the pillow beside the bed and threw it at the door. "Don't come. Go about your business. You're so annoying." Lu Fair looked at Chow Kefi with a strange expression and said with a smile, "I used to look forward to the stars and the moon, but now you want to drive me away. Sister Chow, be careful. If he really leaves later, I'll see where you can cry." Chow Kefi reached out to pinch Lu Fair's waist and said angrily, "It's none of my business where he likes to go. Who is he to me? Why should I worry about it? There are so many women around him, and it's not my turn to worry about it." Lu Fair was pinched by Chow Kefi and begged for mercy. She giggled and said, "Good sisters, stop it. It's so itchy." Yes, you can't worry about it, but it's not that you don't want to worry about it. You want to, but you don't have the strength." Chow Kefi was furious. "You damn girl, if I don't beat you for 3 days, you'll go to the roof and tear the tiles, won't you?" After that, she pounced on Lu Fair. Lu Fair was shocked. She quickly raised her hands and shouted with a smile, "Sister Chow, you've just recovered from a serious illness. Be careful of your body. Don't make trouble." Chow Kefi stopped and glared at Lu Fair. "What do you mean by just recovering from a serious illness? I don't think I'm sick. On the contrary, I think I'm in good health. I've never been so good." Lu Fair knew that Chow Kefi's 9-in white bone claw was powerful, and she also knew that she couldn't do strenuous exercise, let alone get emotional, so she didn't dare to provoke her again. She said carefully, "Sister Chow, don't force yourself. If you really feel uncomfortable, tell me quickly while your little enemy is still here. Otherwise, when our crew finishes filming, he will really disappear again." Chow Kefi said casually, "Humph, who cares about him? He has no conscience. He treats me as..." But soon Chow Kefi came to her senses. Her eyes widened and she said, "What? What do you mean by, when our crew finishes filming, he will disappear again?" Lu Fair said with a proud look, "Hey, Sister Chow, you don't know, do you? When you were in a coma, Zhao Yuzhen came again. As a result, this guy was scared away as soon as he saw Li Jiandong. I saw that your little enemy was more useful than a door god, so I asked him to come to our crew to help us block this kind of evil spirit. Ah, am I very smart?" When Chow Kefi heard this, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. But as soon as she raised her eyebrows, her face immediately fell again. She said in a hypocritical manner, "Humph, what's there to block? You always playing these useless little tricks. Are you going to pay for the hiring fee or me? The crew is so short of funds now. Where can I find the money?" Lu Fair saw that the corners of Chow Kefi's eyes were full of uncontrollable joy, but her words were very stubborn. She giggled and said, "Do you still have to pay for ordering your little enemy? It's okay. Just order him around. I promise it'll be fine. In the future, if there's any physical work in the crew, I'll give it all to him." Chow Kefi suddenly frowned and said, "Have you taken the wrong medicine? Are you ordering him around like a laborer? Lu Fei immediately giggled and fell onto the bed. The fox's tail is exposed, but you're still so stubborn. I think you're more worried about her than anyone else. After Lu Fei finished speaking, she jumped up and hid to one side, for fear that Chow Kefi would come and torture her later. But when she saw that Chow Kefi was angry, her first reaction was to touch her back with her hand, as if to see if her fox's tail was exposed. Lu Fei immediately laughed and said, "Don't worry, I'm just teasing you. The fox's tail is not exposed." Chow Kefi was stunned, and soon she pounced on her with shame and anger. "You wicked girl, if I don't teach you a lesson today, you won't know who I am." Lu Fei let out a cry of alarm and hurriedly ran away, playing hide-and-seek with Chow Kefi in the room. The two of them laughed and joked for a while, and soon the previous storm calmed down. The next day Lu Fei woke up in a daze and looked at the time. She suddenly jumped up from the bed and shouted, "Oh, it's over. I'm going to be late. The director is going to scold me again." She was about to wake Chow Kefi up, but she saw that Chow Kefi's bed was empty. She rushed to the bathroom, only to see that Chow Kefi had already put on her clothes and was drawing makeup in front of the mirror. Lu Fei glanced over and saw that after Chow Kefi's eyes were painted with eyeliner, the charming lines at the corners of her eyes were especially outlined, making her look extremely seductive. Especially her small and red lips were smeared with a layer of sparkling lip gloss, making her red lips look like a ripe cherry. Even a woman like herself couldn't help but want to take a bite. Chow Kefi was born beautiful, and her appearance was outstanding. Could be said that she was born beautiful. Usually she never put on makeup, but today she put on makeup for the first time. The effect of this beautiful woman's meticulous makeup was really very lethal. Even a great beauty like Lu Fei was stunned. She saw that Chow Kefi's skin was white and rosy, and there was a healthy ruddiness in her delicate snow-white skin, which was completely different from the sickly white skin in the past. This kind of ruddiness made Chow Kefi look particularly full of vitality. Her whole body looked gorgeous and people couldn't look at her directly. Lu Fei couldn't help exclaiming, "Sister Chow, you're already beautiful enough. You don't need to put on makeup anymore. If you put on makeup again, are you going to let us live?" Chow Kefi turned around and smiled sweetly. "Am I beautiful?" Lu Fei nodded quickly like a chick pecking rice. "You're so beautiful that even ghosts and gods hate you. Stop putting on makeup. Otherwise, some mountain king will take a fancy to you and take you away to be his wife. You'll be crying all day long." Chow Kefi rolled her eyes at her. "Nonsense. Have you lost your consciousness from all the filming? Don't you know what era you're in?" Lu Fei hurriedly urged, "Stop talking. We're going to be late. Sister Chow, stop putting on makeup. You're already very beautiful. Our driver Lao Wang is a pervert. Do you want him to peek at you when he's driving and cause a car accident?" Chow Kefi raised her eyebrows. "He'd better behave if he doesn't want to lose his job." Lu Fei pushed her out of the bathroom. "All right, you're domineering and glamorous, okay? Get out of the way. I still have to wash up." After a chaotic struggle for a while, they hurried downstairs. As soon as they got downstairs, Chow Kefi suddenly thought of something. "Oh, I'm afraid Li Yundong doesn't know what time we're going out, does he? No, I have to go back and tell him." Lu Fei was well aware of this. She giggled and said, "Didn't you want to drive him away yesterday? He left last night as you wish." Chow Kefi's face turned pale. "What?" Lu Fei saw Chow Kefi's face change dramatically. She was afraid that Chow Kefi would have another heart attack, so she quickly pointed to the door of the hotel and said, "I lied to you. He arrived a long time ago." Chow Kefi looked over and saw Li Yundong and her company Xia Yu standing at the door, talking softly about something. Chow Kefi's heart finally fell back into her stomach. She angrily glared at Lu Fei and said, "You wicked girl, I'll remember this." Chow Kefi walked out of the elevator. Her amazing beauty immediately attracted the attention of almost everyone in the hall. At first glance, everyone's eyes were tightly attracted by her like magnets. There was only one thought echoing in their minds: how could there be such a stunning beauty in the world? Everyone was so shocked by Chow Kefi's beauty that they couldn't speak. For a moment, the hall was silent. Li Yundong, who was at the door, saw that the hall behind him was suddenly so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. He turned around in surprise, but he was also stunned. Even though Li Yundong was used to seeing stunning beauties like Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin, he was still shocked by Chow Kefi's breathtaking beauty. He watched Chow Kefi walk out of the hotel with his mouth agape. The reincarnated Wisdom King, who had beaten the #1 master of Japan and made him vomit blood and faint, was shocked by a beautiful woman who was so weak that he lost his ability to think in an instant. When Chao Kefi walked up to him and smiled at him with a sweet smile, Li Yundong's soul returned to his body. He looked at Chao Kefi in surprise. Just as he was about to speak, he saw Chao Kefi snorting at him like a child throwing a tantrum. Then she raised her chin high, like a general who had won a battle, and returned to the court. She got into the van that had been waiting at the door for a long time. Li Yundong looked at Lu Feier in confusion, pointed at Chao Kefi and said, "What's wrong with her?" Lu Feier pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Why don't you ask her yourself?" As she spoke, she also got into the car. Li Yundong looked at Xiaoyu strangely. "What's wrong with her?" Xiaoyu also shrugged her shoulders with a strange expression. "I don't know." Li Yundong didn't know why. He shook his head and followed her into the van. Fortunately, the compartment of the car was quite spacious, and it was not crowded for 4 people to get in. Along the way, Chao Kefi deliberately didn't look at Li Yundong, pretending to be a lady. She smiled without showing her teeth and spoke quietly, which made Li Yundong more and more surprised. But when they were about to reach their destination, Chao Kefi suddenly received a phone call. At first, she could still answer the phone very quietly, but after saying a few words, her tone suddenly rose 2 octaves, and she said with surprise and anger, "What? Say it again." Li Yundong looked at Chao Kefi curiously, only to see that after hanging up the phone, her face was gloomy and her eyebrows were twisted together angrily. He asked, "What happened?" Chao Kefi scolded angrily, "Damn it, our second female lead is on strike. Well, I'll take a nap. Wake up, the Super 2 group is also false." Chapter 653. The second female lead went on strike? Li Yundong asked in confusion. Lu Feier was also surprised. "No way? Is Keston crazy? She has no money and she's still on strike? Isn't she afraid that we'll ask for compensation?" Chao Kefi said angrily, "How would I know? The director said that Justin was very uncooperative today. She was picky here and there. The director said a few words to her and she put down the burden and said she quit." Lu Feier's eyes widened. Where did she get the confidence to say such a thing? Doesn't she want to stay in the China film and television circle? It's a big taboo to break the contract halfway. Who would dare to look for her in the future? Chao Kefi snorted coldly. Who knows what she's thinking? Li Yundong asked curiously, "Don't you have any backup actors?" Chao Kefi wanted to cry but had no tears. "Do you think it's football or basketball? It's possible to find a backup during the early stage of a movie, but this is a TV series and it's already started. Where can there be a backup?" Although Justin has a bad temper, her requirements are still very in line with the requirements of the TV series. Moreover, her image and temperament are also very good, and her acting skills are also good. Even if she wants to find another actor, there's no place to find one. Lu Feier comforted her. "Sister Chao, don't worry. You can call her quickly. Maybe there's still room for negotiation." Chao Kefi didn't say much. She picked up her mobile phone and dialed Justin's number. But as soon as she dialed, the other side of the phone said, "Sorry, the number you dialed is turned off." Chao Kefi was furious. It seems that she has really made up her mind. Li Yundong didn't know the whole thing at all, but seeing that Chao Kefi was so angry, he advised, "Anger hurts the liver. President Chao, pay attention to your health. Don't worry. Can a living person die from holding his urine?" Lu Feier also said, Yes, Sister Chao, pay attention to your image." Only then did Chao Kefi realize that she had lost her composure. She forced a smile at Li Yundong, then turned her face and looked out of the window. Her eyebrows were full of gloom and worry. At this time, Xiaoyu whispered to Li Yundong, "President Chao is in trouble this time." Li Yundong asked, "What do you mean?" Xiaoyu said softly, "Mr. Chao, not only is the company's capital chain broken, but the operation of the crew is also in a deadlock in the early stage. Although Mr. Chao relied on Mr. Zhao's investment to revive the crew, Mr. Zhao is very cunning. He always gives money little by little as if he wants to control Mr. Chao. The crew will come to a standstill at any time. I think Justin might have seen this situation and wanted to threaten President Chao with a strike in order to raise his salary." Li Yundong asked again, "Mr. Chao can't pay me more?" Xiaoyu shook her head. Not to mention a higher salary, she might not even be able to afford it now. Every time she shoots a film, she almost begs her grandfather to sue the government. It's fine if she earns money, but if the film loses money, she will be miserable. This time Justin's strike will definitely extend the shooting period. The shooting period will also affect the time and effect of the movie to be released to the market. It will also increase the cost. The other investors will definitely be even more unhappy. When the time comes, there will be internal and external troubles. As she spoke, Xiaoyu shook her head with an expression of disbelief. Li Yundong pondered for a while, then turned to Chao Kefi and asked, "What are the requirements for the second female lead in this film?" Chao Kefi turned her face and said without hesitation, "This TV series is about exotic love. The second female lead is a foreign woman. She has to be beautiful and have an outstanding temperament. It's best to have the feeling of a lady from a noble family, reserved and sunny. In fact, the acting skills of this role are secondary, but the temperament and feeling are very important. We have tried many foreign actresses, but none of them have this kind of feeling. Although Justin's character is very bad, her acting skills are very solid. She looks like whatever she plays, so she was chosen at the beginning." After hearing this, Li Yundong pondered for a moment and nodded. "I see. I'll meet this Justin later." Chao Kefi looked at Li Yundong and asked tentatively, "Do you have a way?" Li Yundong smiled slightly. "Let's give it a try. Maybe it will work." Chao Kefi's heart skipped a beat. She had seen all kinds of incredible abilities of this boy, but she didn't dare to imagine that Li Yundong could help her settle such a trivial matter. Seeing the joy on Chao Kefi's face, Li Yundong said with a smile, "Don't be happy too early. I'm just trying. I may not succeed." The smile on Chao Kefi's face became much more sincere and peaceful. She said with a smile, "I'm very happy that you're willing to help. It doesn't matter whether it succeeds or not. You're right. There must be a way. There must be a way." Lu Feier also turned her face and said to Li Yundong with a smile, "If you can settle this matter, I'll make you my idol. How about it?" Li Yundong chuckled, cupped his hands and said, "I don't dare." "If I don't dare, won't your fans kill me?" Lu Feier giggled and said, "It's not easy to be my idol. Think about it yourself." Li Yundong smiled and didn't answer her again. After driving for about 10 minutes, they arrived at the seaside studio. As soon as they entered the set, Li Yundong saw a short man talking to a woman with brown hair and blue eyes. As soon as the man saw Chao Kefi, he immediately came up to her and complained, "President Chao, you're finally here? Go and talk to her yourself. I can't communicate with her." Chao Kefi glanced at Justin, who was smoking a cigarette in a seductive manner not far away. She nodded and said, "Director Song, let me persuade her and see what she wants to do." As she spoke, she went up to him. Director Song looked at her figure and was a little stunned for a moment. He looked at Li Yundong next to him and was slightly stunned. He asked Lu Feier, "Who is this?" Lu Feier said with a smile, "This is President Chao's friend." Director Song said with a displeased expression, "Don't you know the rules? Irrelevant people are not allowed to enter the studio." Lu Feier said disapprovingly, "He's not an irrelevant person. He's very powerful. He's here to help us." Director Song had obviously been holding back his anger these days. He sneered at an inappropriate time and said, "Well, I'd like to see how he can help us." Li Yundong heard these words, but he was not angry. He just glanced at Director Song faintly, and then his eyes fell on Chao Kefi. He saw that Chao Kefi was talking to Justin in a low voice. Her humble appearance was like a little wife who had seen her evil parents-in-law. She was only short of pouring tea and apologizing. It made people think that Justin was the boss of the crew, not Chao Kefi. At first, Justin talked to Chao Kefi without saying a word. In the end, Chao Kefi said with a livid face, "It's absolutely impossible. Who instructed you to do this?" Justin didn't answer her. She just sneered, took a deep breath, sprayed a mouthful of smoke on Chao Kefi's face and smiled proudly. Chao Kefi frowned and subconsciously took a step back. Lu Feier, who was beside her, was angry. She rushed up and said loudly in English, "Pay attention to your attitude." Justin looked at her contemptuously and replied tit for tat, "Pay attention to your words, little girl." Lu Feier was furious. Just as she was about to quarrel with her, Li Yundong came up and reached out to stop her. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll talk to her." When Lu Feier saw him coming up, her face lit up with joy and she obediently retreated to the side. Li Yundong looked at Justin, turned to Chao Kefi and said, "Did the negotiation break down?" Chao Kefi suppressed her anger and said in a low voice, "Her conditions are too harsh." Li Yundong asked, "What conditions?" Chao Kefi said, "She asked to increase the number of scenes of the second female lead, more than the first female lead. In short, she wants to replace Lu Feier as the first female lead." Li Yundong frowned and didn't say anything. At this time Lu Feier suddenly whispered, "Sister Chow, I don't have any objections. If things can be settled." Chow Kefi shook her head and said, "It's not that simple." She also asked to double her current salary. This time, Lu Feier didn't say anything. Justin's salary was not low to begin with. Now that it was doubled, the cost of the TV series would soar. Moreover, if she doubled it, what about the others? Once the wind blew, the consequences would be unimaginable. Li Yundong asked in a deep voice, "That's all?" Chow Kefi sneered and said, "More than that. She has a big appetite. She even asked for a share of 30% of the proceeds from the sale of the TV series in the future." Lu Feier said in shock, "She's really crazy. Anyone with a little IQ wouldn't make such a request. She's taking more than the investors. Who does she think she is? An Oscar-winning actress?" Chow Kefi sneered and didn't say a word. Li Yundong laughed and said, "I understand. President Chow, if you trust me, let me handle it, okay?" Chow Kefi hesitated for a moment. Just as she was about to speak, Director Song, who was next to her, came up and complained to Li Yundong, "Hey, who are you? You want to point fingers as soon as you come here? Don't you see that we are already in a mess here? Please look in the mirror and don't make trouble for them, okay?" Li Yundong didn't look at him. He looked straight at Chow Kefi and asked in a deep voice, "President Chow, you make your own decision." Chow Kefi fixed her eyes on Li Yundong, and her mind raced for a moment. She remembered that when she had first met Li Yundong, the boy in front of her was so young and shy, but now he had grown into a man of indomitable spirit. His broad shoulders could shelter him from the wind and rain. Chow Kefi looked at Li Yundong's gentle eyes. For some reason, her heart gradually calmed down. It was as if as long as this boy took action, he could settle anything. Chow Kefi nodded slightly and said softly, "Then I'll leave it to you." Director Song, who was standing to one side, had always had a good impression of Chow Kefi. When he saw that Chow Kefi was looking at Li Yundong ambiguously, he became more and more unhappy. In addition, the matter in front of him was even related to the life and death of the crew in Chow Kefi's company. He couldn't help but be anxious. "President Chow, are you serious? Even if you are in a hurry, you can't do this, can you?" Chow Kefi turned her head and shouted in a low voice, "I made the decision, and I am responsible for it." "Shut up." Today Chow Kefi was very beautiful. When Director Song was shouted at by her, he suddenly felt a decisive momentum coming towards him, and he was forced to swallow what he wanted to say. After getting Chow Kefi's approval, Li Yundong turned to Lu Feier and said with a smile, "Help me translate." Before Lu Feier could speak, Director Song sneered, looking like he was watching the fun. He sneered in his heart and said, You have no hair on your mouth, so you can't do anything. This toy boy doesn't even know English. What can he do?" While he was sneering, the other staff in the studio noticed the situation here and gathered around to see how this young boy would deal with the crisis in front of him. Chapter 654. Li Yundong's words surprised Lu Feier very much. She didn't seem to dare to imagine that this handsome man, who was omnipotent in her mind, didn't know English. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong curiously. "You don't speak English?" Li Yundong also asked curiously, "Why do Chinese people have to speak English?" Lu Feier was a little speechless by his question. Although she didn't think so in her heart, she still obediently followed Li Yundong to Justin. When Justin saw Li Yundong at a glance, her eyes subconsciously lit up and she secretly praised him in her heart. What a handsome man. But for a woman of her age, money was the most important thing to her. In her eyes, Li Yundong was a good-looking but useless spearhead. It was not worth her energy at all. Even so, she didn't mind talking to such a handsome boy. Justin took the initiative to reach out to Li Yundong and asked with a smile in English, "Hi, what's your name?" Li Yundong also shook hands with her politely, but replied in Chinese, "My name is Li Yundong." After Lu Feier translated, Justin frowned slightly and said to Lu Feier, "Tell him that he should learn English and then talk to me. This is the etiquette a gentleman should have." After listening to Lu Feier's translation, Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then tell her that this is China. It's her who should learn to talk in Chinese. This is also what a woman who knows etiquette should do." When Lu Feier heard this, she secretly vented her anger in her heart. She beamed with joy and translated it to Justin. Justin's face darkened and she said in a rather unfriendly tone, "I think you've probably made a mistake. Right now, I should be the one who has the right to speak in this place, not a little boy like you who comes from nowhere. I think you might be able to turn around and go back to your original school to learn English a little better." By the way, you can learn more social etiquette before you talk to me. There was no dirty word in Justin's words, but every word was full of sarcasm and mockery. Lu Feier was angry and worried when she heard this. She was afraid that Li Yundong would fly into a rage after she translated it. In Lu Feier's opinion, the most annoying thing about boys at Li Yundong's age was that they were still wet behind the ears. Li Yundong saw Lu Feier looking at him anxiously and hesitating to say something. He seemed to know what the beautiful star was worried about. He smiled gently and said, "It's okay. Translate according to the original words. You have to be professional. Even if the other party swears, you can translate it." Hearing his words, Lu Feier translated them truthfully. After Li Yundong heard it, he was not angry at all. Instead, he smiled at Lu Feier and said, "Tell her that there are two choices in front of her now. First, she can continue to shoot honestly and take back her so-called big shot style and unreasonable demands. Second, she can pack up and get out of here immediately." After Yundong's words the Yundong Li Yundong and listen to Fei the director burst Fei Dong the people he yen don 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 li he Yundong is just say he is Li Lu Feier don't listen to him. This person is just making trouble. Justin is just taking the opportunity to ask for a higher price. She is also seeking money. I think we can still talk about it. Now we really can't afford to delay or toss around. Li Yundong glanced at the short director and didn't say anything. He looked at Chao Kefi as if asking, "Do you still insist on letting me make the decision?" In the past, Chao Kefi had always been a woman who liked to deal with this kind of difficulty in a gentle way. Over the years, she had been good at playing tricks and was used to getting benefits from both sides. Suddenly, she was a little hesitant, but soon her eyes narrowed and she gritted her teeth and nodded hard. Li Yundong smiled and nodded at her, then said to Lu Feier, "It's okay. Translated according to what I said." Lu Feier was also a master who wanted the world to be in chaos. She turned her face, and with an imposing manner, she translated Li Yundong's words with a swagger of her strength. Justin suddenly became furious. She glared at Lu Feier fiercely and then at Li Yundong. She said angrily, "I'd like to see where you can find another actor." After that, she picked up her small bag and was about to leave. The staff of the crew suddenly panicked. Director Song hurriedly shouted, "Hey Xiao Zhang Xiao Lu, what are you waiting for? Stop her. Don't let her go." As Director Song spoke, he rushed to Li Yundong angrily and shouted, "If you don't understand, don't make trouble. Who do you think you are? Pointing fingers here? Fire her and you'll act? Do you know how long it took us to choose such an actor?" Li Yundong looked at the roaring emperor in front of him with a smile on his face. He asked with a smile, "Are you willing to be blackmailed by her like this? If she is satisfied, others will follow suit and make trouble? Greed is hard to fill. How much money can you have to fill it? How many plays did she shoot before? Just scrap it and reshoot it. At worst, I'll help you pay for it." These days, whoever had milk was a mother. As soon as he heard that Li Yundong was willing to pay for it, Director Song's voice suddenly lowered. He was stunned, but he still said angrily, "Do you think I don't know? This is no longer a question of whether to scrap the previous part of her shooting. Where can we find another foreign actor with a good image and temperament in such a short time?" Li Yundong smiled slightly. "You want to find an actor? I have one ready." Director Song was surprised and doubtful. "Where? Don't lie to me." Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's okay. I'll go find one now." As he said this, he walked out of the studio. Seeing this, Lu Feier hurriedly said, "I'll go with you." Li Yundong didn't look back. He waved his hand and said, "No, I'll be back soon. Wait for me for a while." Lu Feier didn't want to listen. She chased after Li Yundong out of the studio, but as soon as she went out, Li Yundong was gone. She looked around in shock, only to see that there was no place to hide anyone, as if he had evaporated into thin air. Lu Feier was stunned for a long time before she turned around and returned to the studio. Her face was blank and she muttered in a low voice, "Is he really a god?" When she returned to the studio, she saw that the other staff members of the film crew were taking a soft approach to appease Justin. The British girl also seemed to want to see the actor that Li Yundong had found to replace her. She smoked with a mocking expression and watched all this coldly. At first, Director Song still had a glimmer of hope, but as time passed he slowly couldn't sit still. He kept asking Chao Kefi about Li Yundong's identity and background. However, Chao Kefi didn't want Li Yundong to be involved too much, and she didn't want Li Yundong to worry too much about her, so she kept evading Director Song's words. She just said evasively, "He is a very complicated person. You will do what he says. You just need to know this. Don't worry. Lu Feier, who was standing to one side, also chimed in with a heartless expression. That's right, Director Song. You're too worried. The person that Sister Chow and I invited back is a big shot. Director Song was a little relieved, but he muttered, big shot. How can there be so many big shots these days? Is there someone who is more important than me? Lu Feier chuckled and ignored him. She turned her face and began to chat and laugh with Chow Kefi. A group of people waited in the studio, bored. This wait lasted for 2 hours. At first, Chow Kefi and Lu Feier were full of confidence, thinking that Li Yundong would come back soon. But as time passed, they also became a little flustered and weak. They didn't even whisper to each other. The two of them looked at each other, and Director Song paced back and forth anxiously, like an ant on a hot pan. Waiting like this, another half an hour passed, and Justin finally couldn't bear it anymore. She sneered, threw the cigarette in her hand on the ground, stepped on it with the tip of her high heels, and said in a sarcastic tone, "It seems that the savior hasn't appeared. You can continue to wait. I'll go first." With that, she was about to go out. Director Song's face changed and he quickly shouted, "Hey, don't go. Let's talk about it." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a voice coming from outside the studio. "Let her go?" As soon as everyone heard this voice, they were immediately overjoyed and cheered for no reason. They saw Li Yundong walking in with a blonde girl. This girl was wearing a sky blue school uniform. Her figure was graceful. Although her clothes were very ordinary, she was beautiful. The facial features on her small face were exquisite and beautiful, which was very in line with the aesthetic standards of the Oriental people. In particular, this girl's face was a little pale, and her eyes were full of fear, as if she had just been frightened. She looked delicate and pitiful, which made people want to hug her and comfort her. This girl was none other than Chris. Chris had been too bored at Li Yundong's house before, so she went back to school by herself. But in the middle of the class, Li Yundong rushed in and took her away from the classroom like a robber. Without saying a word, he took her high up in the sky and flew from Tianan City to Haikou City. Poor Chris had never been tortured like this. She only felt as if she had been sitting on a rocket in outer space. All her bones were about to fall apart. She had gone from one city to another in a daze. The worst thing was that she didn't know why she was here. When everyone saw Chris, their eyes lit up. Director Song's mouth was wide open. He walked over to Chris with his eyes wide open. He looked her up and down carefully. The more he looked at her, the more he praised her. The more he looked, the more he praised her. "Not bad, not bad, not bad." As he said this, he said to Chris, "Why don't you turn around and let me have a look?" Chris was born in a famous family. She had an excellent cultivation and a good family background. In the past, she had been pursued and loved wherever she went. But since she came to China, she had been a little unpopular. Especially now that she had been brought to this place by Li Yundong in confusion. It was like human trafficking. No matter how good-tempered she was, she couldn't stand it. Chris looked at Li Yundong angrily and said in a low voice, "Sure. Li Yundong, what the hell is going on?" Before Li Yundong could speak, Director Song suddenly said in surprise, "You can speak Chinese? Your Mandarin is good." Chris reluctantly smiled at the man beside her, who was half a head shorter than her. "Thank you for your compliment. My grandmother is from China." Director Song clapped his hands and said loudly, "That's great. You're a mixed race. Your temperament and appearance are in line with our requirements. It's you?" After that, he turned his head and said to the dumbfounded Justin with an impartial face and impolitely, "You're fired." Director Song's words were domineering, as if he had completely vented the resentment in his heart. But after he finished speaking, he saw Li Yundong looking at him with a faint smile. He quickly apologized to Li Yundong, stretched out his hands and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, I didn't recognize Mount Tai. You've helped us solve a big problem." Justin hadn't expected that such a thing would appear at this time, especially when she saw that Chris had a natural noble temperament. At first glance, she could tell that she was from a famous family. Moreover, she was young and beautiful. Compared with her, it was like heaven and earth. She said in shock and anger, "You can't fire me. You don't have the right and power." At this time, Chow Kefi sneered and said, "Then do I have the right and power?" Justin looked at her angrily and said, "What right do you have to drive me out of the shooting team?" Chow Kefi sneered and said, "No reason, because I'm the producer. You can go back first, or you can make an appointment with your agent and lawyer in advance to wait for us at home. We'll contact you in a few days." After that, she turned her head and no longer looked at Justin. Her face was full of pride. The staff in the studio couldn't stand Justin's behavior for a long time. They laughed loudly and mocked Justin. Justin's pretty face turned red and white in a burst of ridicule. She gritted her teeth, turned her head and rushed out. Director Song laughed and said to Chow Kefi, "That's great. It's really satisfying. I don't like this bitch for a long time." Chow Kefi smiled slightly, turned to Li Yundong and said, "Thank you so much." Li Yundong laughed and said, "It's nothing. You don't have to thank me." For a moment, everyone in the studio laughed and celebrated. Only Chris was shocked and angry. She grabbed Li Yundong and said loudly, "What on earth are you doing? I don't know how to act." Li Yundong winked at her and said in a low voice, "You don't know how to act? You can learn." Chris wanted to cry but had no tears. I came to China to learn cultivation, not to learn to act. If I want to learn to act, why don't I go to Hollywood? God. Who can tell me what the hell is going on?" Chapter 655. Just as Li Yundong was involved in a small storm in the crew, Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and Zhou Qin were involved in a bigger storm in the Shin family in Tianan City. After the three of them returned the Medicine King tripod intact, Shen Wankai, who had been knocked out in the conflict and then frightened by the bad news, immediately jumped up from the hospital bed as if he had come back to his senses. Shen Wankai looked at the Medicine King tripod that he had lost and regained. For a moment he burst into tears, but the Tianai auction house was even more excited than him. The manager of the auction house almost worshipped Su Chan, Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin, and wished he could offer them a longevity temple. If Su Chan, Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin hadn't brought the Medicine King tripod back, the Tianai auction house couldn't imagine what kind of blow this incident would have caused to them. Who would dare to bid for their things in the future? Because the news that the Medicine King tripod had been sold at an amazing price spread all over the country in the first place, the news that the Medicine King tripod had been magically taken away immediately after the auction was over was even faster than this news. Stealing a work of art worth 700 million yuan in public was a big deal no matter where it was. This matter even alarmed the provincial party committee and the provincial government. Even Li Yuanbua and Zhou Kachang were alarmed, especially when Zhou Kachang knew that this matter also involved Li Yundong and his daughter. He even asked Li Yuanbua for help and transferred Director Zhong, who was the deputy director of the Provincial Public Security Department, to lead the team to set up the Medicine King tripod robbery investigation team, and personally asked about this matter. Therefore, when the Medicine King tripod was returned to Zhao intact, it immediately caused a sensation in Tianan City. For a time, countless reporters swarmed there. Not only the reporters from the major TV stations in the province and the city, but even CCTV also sent a special team. For a time the Shin Villa was very lively. "Miss Zhou, may I ask who took the Medicine King tripod? How did you find the Medicine King tripod?" "Miss Zhou, I heard that you were also present when the Medicine King tripod was robbed. Can you describe the scene for us?" Miss Zhou, may I ask where you found the Medicine King tripod? How did you get the Medicine King tripod from the robbers? Do you have any connection with the robbers?" All kinds of questions flooded Zhou Qin like a tide. The reporters stretched out their arms and almost stuffed the microphones into her mouth. Su Chan, who was standing on the second floor of the villa and watching all this, patted her chest with lingering fear. That was close. Fortunately, I wasn't dealing with these reporters downstairs. Otherwise, I would have been swallowed alive by them. Zi Yuan stood next to Su Chan and said with a smile, "I know that neither you nor I can handle it, so I asked Zhou Qin to go." Zi Yuan was very careful. She had expected such a situation before returning the Medicine King tripod, so she and Zhou Qin had long been prepared to deal with it. There was no better candidate than Zhou Qin in this situation. This socialite of the Zhou family seemed to be born for this kind of grand occasion. At this time Zhou Qin, who was downstairs, gave full play to her bearing as a daughter of a famous family. She dealt with every question flawlessly, especially when she heard a very malicious question from a reporter. She turned her head to look at the reporter and said, "Miss, you can ask the public security officers involved in the investigation about your previous questions. I've told them everything I know. As for your last question, I would like to ask, why do you think we have any connection with the robbers?" This reporter was a woman in her 30s. She was the ace reporter of the provincial TV station. She had always been known for her sharp and aggressive questions. She said bluntly, "With all due respect, when the robbers stole the Medicine King tripod, it was the three of you who were present. And when the Medicine King tripod was returned, it was the three of you who were present. This can't help but make people's imagination run wild. Zhou Qin raised her eyebrows, and her eyebrows were full of heroic spirit. She said in a diplomatic language, "You are reporter Wang of the provincial TV station, right? I know you. You are very famous." Reporter Wang smiled slightly and said, "Thank you for your compliment, but please don't bypass my question." Zhou Qin smiled slightly and retorted sharply, "I didn't bypass your question. I just think that your fame doesn't match your ability. It's a typical case of unworthy reputation. Because I think it would be better for you to be a detective or a movie screenwriter. You have a very rich imagination. If we have something to do with the robbers, why should we return the Medicine King tripod intact?" Colleagues were enemies. When the reporters around saw the ace reporter of the provincial capital being defeated, they immediately let out a low roar of laughter. Reporter Wang was slightly annoyed, but she quickly said, "Isn't it? The whole thing looks like a self-directed farce, or is it just a publicity stunt?" As soon as this was said, the reporters around whispered to each other and nodded secretly. This was also what they had guessed, but not everyone dared to make things clear so directly like reporter Wang. If one wanted to be a qualified reporter in China, it was absolutely impossible to be a good reporter without an excellent sense of desire and character. Almost every reporter present knew Zhou Qin's identity, and they also knew that the daughter of the Zhou family in front of them was not easy to deal with. There was no one like reporter Wang who dared to twist the tiger's whiskers. For a moment, everyone looked at Zhou Qin in unison, wanting to see how the eldest daughter of the Zhou family would deal with such a sharp and shrewd question. Zhou Qin was not as angry as everyone thought, nor did she speak ambiguously. She just smiled slightly and asked, "Using a work of art worth 700 million yuan to hype up?" The Medicine King tripod was sold at an astonishing price of 700 million yuan. This itself is a huge hype. Do you need to use a self-directed robbery to hype up? What if something goes wrong? Is it worth taking such a huge risk? Is it worth it? Reporter Wang, your imagination is incomparably rich, but your IQ is really a bit problematic. Reporter Wang had obviously practiced an iron face for a long time. As if she hadn't heard Zhou Qin's teasing, she quickly asked, "Miss Zhou, can you tell us in detail how you retrieved the Medicine King tripod?" Zhou Qin changed back to a diplomatic smile and tone. "You should ask the public security personnel in charge of this case. I have no comment." Reporter Wang was unwilling to give up and asked a series of questions. The other reporters were also unwilling to be left out. Once again, all kinds of questions were thrown at Zhou Qin like a storm. While Zhou Qin was dealing with them one by one, several young men suddenly squeezed into the crowd. The young man in the lead grabbed Zhou Qin and walked out without saying anything. Su Chan quickly grabbed Ziyuan's arm and said, "Sister Ziyuan, has Sister Zhou Qin been taken away? Should we save her?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "Don't be silly. With Zhou Qin's current strength, if she doesn't want to go, who can take her away? This must be an acquaintance of Zhou Qin's." Only then did Su Chan feel relieved. She suddenly smiled and said, "Yes, Sister Ziyuan, you are so smart." The surrounding reporters rarely encountered such a beautiful and sharp-tongued interviewee as Zhou Qin. How could they let her go so easily? They all followed her out like a tide. The young man turned his head and pointed to Ziyuan and Su Chan on the second floor, saying, "Go and interview them. They also know." These reporters turned their heads in unison and saw Su Chan and Ziyuan looking at them in the corridor on the second floor. Their eyes lit up, and many reporters immediately turned around and rushed toward them. Su Chan was shocked. She quickly turned her head and hid in the room that Chen Wankai had prepared for them. Ziyuan had a noble temperament and didn't like to have too much contact with secular people. She had always avoided this kind of scene as much as possible, so she naturally followed Su Chan and dodged quickly. Seeing that the two of them were hiding like frightened rabbits, these reporters had no choice but to turn back to look for Zhou Qin. However, when they saw Zhou Qin get into an Audi A6 and drive away, they could only look at the car and sigh. The person who brought Zhou Qin into the car was Secretary Liu, who had made a private deal with Li Jiandong before. After he sent Zhou Qin into the car, he got into the driver's seat and started driving. As soon as Zhou Qin got into the car, she saw a middle-aged man with a square face and a dignified appearance sitting in the back. It was her father, Zhou Keqiang. Since the opening ceremony of Desanxian, although the relationship between Zhou Qin and her father was still a little stiff, it was not like before, like a life-and-death enemy. As soon as they met, sparks would fly in all directions. Zhou Qin nodded slightly and greeted him indifferently, "Dad?" Zhou Keqiang habitually took out a cigarette from his pocket and rubbed it with his hand. Before he could speak, Zhou Qin frowned and said, "Why can't you get rid of your old habits?" Zhou Keqiang smiled and said, "I won't smoke. Can't I smell it?" Zhou Qin didn't comment and said lightly, "Why do you have time to come to me today?" Zhou Keqiang put the cigarette between his nose and took a deep breath. He sighed and said, "You made such a big noise. How could I not come to you? Hey, 700 million, not 7 million, not 70 million. Humph, you're really capable. You didn't move for a long time, but when you moved, you made a mess for me. Do you know how big the impact of this matter is? The central government has been shaken. Do you know that?" Zhou Qin frowned secretly. "Is that necessary? 700 million is not enough to alarm the central government, is it? You officials spend more than this every day on eating, drinking, gambling, and wasting money, right?" Zhou Keqiang was furious. He raised his eyebrows and said angrily, What nonsense are you talking about? How can you spout such nonsense?" Zhou Qin sneered and turned her head to one side, as if she disdained to say a few more words to her father, who was an official. Zhou Keqiang took a deep breath, suppressed his anger and said, "Yes, I know that you have embarked on a completely different path from me. You are very arrogant now, but don't forget that no matter how arrogant you are, you still have to roll in this turbid world. No matter how powerful the people in the cultivation world are, they can't jump out of the cage of the 3 realms and the 5 elements. No matter how capable you are, no matter how great you are, you still can't jump out of the cage of the 3 realms and the 5 elements. I am still your father." Although Zhou Qin's face was still cold, her heart trembled. She had grown up in the system, so she naturally knew how correct Zhou Keqiang's words were. In the land of China, although many ordinary people did not like to talk about sex, the inheritance of the idea of official standards for 2,000 years had led to the ubiquitous official culture, and the power of officialdom was pervasive. Although cultivators were powerful and heaven-defying, if they offended the government, there were only a few paths waiting for them. They would be surrounded and suppressed by the government with the strength of the whole country, or they would be exiled abroad, or they would hide in the mountains and forests, or they would be destroyed, or they would directly ascend to become immortals and jump out of the cage. Apart from that, there was no other way. This was something that both Buddhist and Taoist cultivation sects had been proven countless times in the long history of China's 2,000 years of feudalism. During the Wei, Jin, and Southern and Northern dynasties, Emperor Taiwu of the Northern Wei dynasty and Emperor Wuzong of the Tang dynasty had launched a large-scale campaign to destroy Buddhism. At that time, the Buddhist cultivation sects occupied the absolute advantage in the cultivation world, but as soon as the imperial court gave the order, Buddhism was immediately swept away. All the major sects withered like fallen leaves in late autumn, which was tragic. When Zhou Qin was reading the history of the cultivation world, she clearly remembered that during the Wei, Jin, and Southern and Northern dynasties, Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty had done something even more heinous. He had destroyed Buddhism twice and Taoism once, and the reason for destroying Taoism was simply incredible. During the Southern and Northern dynasties, although Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty was a barbarian himself, he claimed that he was close to the Han and distant from the Hu. Buddhism was a foreign religion and also belonged to the Hu. In order to prove that he was close to the Han, Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty declared that he was a devout Taoist believer and wanted to suppress Buddhism. However, it was impossible to suppress Buddhism by force, so Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty organized a large-scale debate and a private battle with great fanfare. However, because the Buddhist cultivation sects had an absolute advantage in the cultivation world at that time, the Taoist cultivators suffered a crushing defeat in both the debate and the battle. Emperor Wu of the Northern Zhou dynasty, who believed in Taoism, was furious. He hated the rampant power of Buddhism and the Taoist cultivation sects for not doing their best. So in a rage, he simply shed all pretenses and announced to the whole country, "I will destroy both Buddhism and Taoism." As a result, the Buddhist and Taoist cultivators who had been fighting fiercely were beaten by the imperial court until they cried for their parents. It was a tragic sight. This was the case in the ancient era of cold weapons, let alone the era of hot weapons. If a cultivator was careless, an ordinary person could also kill him. Since ancient times, people had not fought with officials and religious forces had not fought with imperial forces. This was a famous saying summed up by blood and tears. If the government really targeted them and decided to suppress them vigorously, the consequences would be unimaginable. Zhou Qin was secretly frightened. She turned her head and said to Zhou Keqiang with a serious face, "Does the higher-ups have any objections?" Zhou Keqiang snorted. You also know how to be afraid. Aren't you the most fearless one? Zhou Qin snorted coldly. I'm afraid of implicating him. Zhou Keqiang said, hey, worry about yourself first. For a while, keep quiet. The higher-ups have already noticed you. Don't be listed and don't do anything out of line that can't be made up for. Otherwise, you can prepare to go abroad. Zhou Qin stopped talking. Her face was cold and she didn't say a word for a long time. Secretary Liu, who was driving, took Zhou Qin and Zhou Keqiang around, and then parked the car near the Shin family's villa. After Zhou Qin got out of the car, Zhou Keqiang said at the moment when she was about to close the door, remember what I said. Keep a low profile, otherwise you know the consequences. Zhou Qin didn't say anything and got out of the car with a sullen face. After she got out of the car, she glanced around and suddenly saw Zhou Ping and Zhang Ling of the Jingyi school not far away. Zhou Ping saw Zhou Qin and the others looking at her and then went into the villa. She turned her head and said to Zhang Ling, Master, what should we do with the Medicine King tripod? Do we still have to fight for it? Zhang Ling's eyes were fixed on the license plate number of Zhou Keqiang's car. She obviously recognized who the owner of the car was. This Shiji of the Jingyi school not only had a very high cultivation, but also had a very keen sense of smell. Her face was very ugly and after a long time she said, don't think about it. The Medicine King tripod has made a little too much noise. It's not suitable for us to intervene anymore. Zhou Ping's eyes widened. Then are we just going to let the Medicine King tripod fall into Li Jiandong's hands? Zhang Ling snorted coldly. It doesn't matter. In a while, it will be the inauguration ceremony of the leader of the Linggong sect. At that time we will get back all of this. After that she smiled coldly, turned around and shouted coldly, let's wait and see. Sorry I went out today. It's late and there will be another update later. Chapter 656. When Zhou Qin returned to the Shin family's villa, most of the reporters had already dispersed, and only a few reporters were still waiting. However, Shin Wankai was concerned about the rest of Su Chan, Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and the others, so he had announced that the Shin family's villa was no longer open to the public and asked all the reporters in the villa to leave, so Zhou Qin was free again. When Zhou Qin returned to her room and told Su Chan and Ziyuan about the warning she had received from Zhou Keqiang, Ziyuan and Su Chan both fell into silence. Although Su Chan was simple, she was also familiar with history. Naturally, she knew how terrible this warning was. She raised her head worriedly and said, Sister Ziyuan, how about, we'd better persuade Yundong not to take this Medicine King tripod. Now I feel that this Medicine King tripod is really a terrible hot potato. Whoever holds it is like holding a time bomb. Ziyuan also frowned slightly. She thought for a while and shook her head. Now it's not a matter of whether we want this Medicine King tripod or not, but we really should keep a low profile. Li Yundong has made such a big noise in Japan this time. In order to let him get away, we even alarmed all the famous TV stations in Japan. Even if the Japanese cultivation world controls the media through their own strength, there will be some news leaked out. I believe that the higher-ups will know something about it. Zhou Qin also sighed and said, if it's just in our own country it's fine, but if it causes any international problems, it will be a big trouble. The three beautiful women looked at each other and smiled bitterly at the same time. The three of them should have been the most carefree little girls at this age, but because they had been involved in all kinds of storms and waves in the cultivation world, they had inadvertently stood on the top of the storm. It was easy to go up but difficult to come down. Even a woman as intelligent as Ziyuan couldn't think of a good way to deal with the predicament in front of her for a while. Compared with them, the rest of the Shin family seemed to be even more tired. In Shin Wansai's bedroom, Shin Wansai's second concubine, third concubine, fourth concubine Li Shaoxian, Shin Hui, and Shin Yu all gathered together, surrounding Shin Wankai as if they were forcing him to abdicate. This time, it was rare for everyone in the Shin family to work together to talk about the same thing. Aunt Zheng, the third concubine, wiped away her tears and cried to Shin Wankai, Old master, even if you don't think about us, you have to think about Xiao Wei and Xiao Yu. No matter how wrong they are and how naughty they are your flesh and blood after all. You can't destroy this family. The fourth concubine, Li Shaoxian, who was usually at odds with him, also cried and said, Old Shin, I know you are angry with me but you can't be so reckless. 700 million yuan is not a small number. This money can be said to be the lifeblood of our Shin family. Shin Wankai sat at the desk and said impatiently, Am I so poor that I can't even afford 700 million yuan? It was true that for Xin Wankai, who had started from scratch and developed for decades, he was still a rich man. 700 million yuan was only a small part of his assets. However, it was not easy for a large family to take out 700 million yuan in one go. Moreover, although the Xin family's property was tens of billions of yuan, most of it was real estate, and the floating capital was only about 700 to 800 million yuan. 700 million yuan could be said to have emptied the Xin family's pocket. But for Xin Wansai's concubines and his children, Xin Wansai's move revealed a strong signal. Today he could spend 700 million yuan on a Medicine King tripod, but what about tomorrow? 1 billion? 2 billion the day after tomorrow? In this way, even Bill Gates couldn't stand such a toss. Most importantly, Xin Wankai spent 700 million yuan to buy this Medicine King tripod, neither for collection nor for charity, but to give it to Li Yunyang. This was too much. He didn't even care about his relatives. If this could be tolerated, what could be tolerated? Xin Wansai's third wife and fourth wife were furious. When has Xin Wankai been so kind to me? He didn't hesitate to empty his pocket and spend 700 million yuan to please me? As a result, the third concubine and the fourth concubine, who were usually at odds with each other, immediately joined hands and were determined to persuade Xin Wankai to give up the Medicine King tripod no matter what. In order to persuade Xin Wankai, they even pulled in the second concubine and their children, who had never had their own opinions. The whole family went into battle together. Hearing Xin Wansai's words, the third concubine, Aunt Zheng, said, "Old master, our family is very rich, but 700 million yuan is really not a small amount. If this money is taken out, our circulating capital will be empty. Even if we pay in installments, we can't afford it. If we encounter any difficulties during this period, the consequences will be unimaginable. Old master, you don't want the country you have fought for to be destroyed in one day, do you?" Aunt Zheng's words were so sincere that Xin Wankai immediately fell silent. For Xin Wankai, he had doubted this more than once. Is it worth spending 700 million yuan to be apprenticed? Moreover, looking at Li Jiandong, he doesn't look like a master who can be apprenticed with 700 million yuan. Did I do wrong or right in this matter? Especially during the period when the Medicine King tripod was lost, Xin Wansai's heart was in turmoil. But now the Medicine King tripod had been lost and recovered. Although he was excited, he had to face the problem that he had thought about over and over again. Seeing that Xin Wankai was silent, Li Shaoxian also tried to persuade him. "Old Xin, I won't say anything else. Let's talk about our current situation. It's not that you don't know that it's easy to fight for the country, but difficult to defend it. Now how many people are looking at us and want to take advantage of our weakness to pounce on us and bite us? Old Xin, think about it. Who doesn't know the news of buying the Medicine King tripod? Our enemies have been looking forward to us buying this Medicine King tripod for a long time, so that they can take the opportunity to attack us when we are short of funds. How much our company's stock price has been suppressed in the past 2 days? You don't know, do you?" Xin Wansai's eyes narrowed. He raised his head and snorted coldly. "If they want to suppress me in this aspect, they are too naive." Aunt Zheng, the third elder, persuaded again, "Old master, you can't underestimate your opponents. Who knows if they have any huge funds hidden behind them?" As she spoke, she quietly pulled Xin Hui's hand and motioned for her to give him some advice. Xin Hui was clever and very good at observing people's expressions. She thought for a moment and said, "Old master, are you afraid that someone will say that you will go back on your word after bidding for the auction item? At that time your credibility will be ruined?" This sentence surprised Xin Wankai. He looked at Xin Hui in surprise. His favorite pearl in daily life really knew his mind best. What she said was one of Xin Wansai's concerns, and this concern was the most dignified one. Xin Hui's words made the people in the room light up in an instant. Li Shaoxian, the fourth elder, quickly said, Yes, Xiaohui is right. Old Xin, if you are worried about this, you can rest assured. You are not the first one to break the contract. What are you afraid of?" Aunt Zheng also said, "That's right. The Medicine King tripod was not snatched from our hands. It was snatched from the hands of the auction house. Who knows if it was exchanged or not? This is not called breaking the contract. This is a matter of course. It's not our old master's fault, don't you think?" Li Shaoxian saw that Xin Wankai was silent, as if hesitating. She also saw that Xin Hui's previous words were quite popular, so she secretly stepped on Xin Yu's foot and said in a low voice, "You also say something. Don't poke here like a piece of wood." Xin Yu seemed to wake up from a dream. He coughed dryly and said, "Dad, in fact, I don't care if you buy this Medicine King tripod. After all, it's your money. You can buy whatever you want, right? but I just can't figure it out. Why did you give it to this Li Yundong? What on earth is he capable of receiving such a heavy gift? Even if he saved your life, Dad, you don't have to do this, do you? Shen Yu's words made the faces of Lao San and Lao Si change at the same time. Lao Si immediately stepped on Shen Yu's foot, indicating that he should stop talking. Lao San was furious in his heart. Idiot, he's really a big idiot with a golden appearance but rotten inside. I still don't know what kind of character the old man has. Although Chen Wankai was headstrong and self-opinionated, he was an ambitious and decisive man. For such an important matter in front of him, he had his own decision. As a relative of him, all he could do was to understand the pros and cons and move him with emotion. With Chen Wansai's character, he would naturally make his own choice. But if anyone pointed fingers at what he had done and questioned it, he would definitely suffer the strongest backlash from him. Sure enough, Shen Wankai raised his head, but there was no angry expression on his face. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "Then tell me, why can't I spend 700 million yuan to buy the Medicine King tripod for this Li Yundong?" The third brother, Ant Zheng, and the fourth brother, Li Shaoxian, both felt bad in their hearts. They kept winking at Shen Yu, but Shen Yu didn't seem to see them. He said confidently, "Is there any need to say that? His surname is Li. He's an outsider. Dad, you can't spend 700 million yuan to please an outsider, can you? When did you spend so much money on me?" Shen Yu's words made everyone in the room turn pale and look at Shen Wankai in horror, except for himself and Shen Wankai. The fourth concubine quickly grabbed Shen Yu and said in a trembling voice, "Old Shen, you are as ignorant and talking nonsense. Don't take it to heart." However, Shen Wankai still stood up with a smile on his face. He patted Shen Yu on the shoulder and said to Li Shaoxian in a warm voice, "It's okay. Yu will grow up after all. It's rare for him to have his own ideas. Let him say it." Shen Yu was encouraged by Shen Wankai and his courage suddenly increased a lot. He said, "Dad, you're right. I'm not young anymore. When can you let me be the master of the family? When will I be able to satisfy my craving of 700 million yuan?" Shen Wankai couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. His abnormal behavior made Ant Zheng and Li Shaoxian more and more afraid, while Shen Hui quietly stayed away from Shen Yu. Shen Wankai patted Shen Yu on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Do you also want to have this addiction? Not bad, not bad. You have ambition and ideals, but... do you remember what your surname is?" Shen Yu also laughed with his father and said, "Dad, are you stupid? Of course my surname is Shen." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Shen Wankai suddenly become furious. He suddenly turned around and slapped himself heavily in the face, knocking him to the ground with a bang. Shen Wankai was so angry that he was like an old lion whose territory had been violated. He roared angrily, "Do you still remember that your surname is Shen? I thought you had forgotten. Since you remember that your surname is Shen, then you should remember clearly that I am your father. What your father does is not up to you to tell me what to do. You want to take over my job? Wait until I'm dead." His roar was so loud that everyone in the villa could hear it clearly. The others in the bedroom were even more frightened. Li Shaoxian boldly reached out to pull Shen Wansai's hand and said with a forced smile, "Old Shen, don't be angry. It's not good to be angry." Shen Wankai suddenly shook off her hand and roared, "Don't you just want me to die early? Get out, all of you." The third concubine glared at Shen Yu with hatred and winked at Shen Hui. The mother and daughter quickly went out of the door. The second concubine, Mrs. Ma, also sighed, softly recited a few Buddhist scriptures and followed them out of the door. The fourth concubine, Li Shaoxian, wiped her tears as she walked out. When she reached the door, she turned to Shen Yu, who had been beaten in a daze, and said, "Yu, let's go. Don't make your father unhappy." Shen Yu covered his cheek and looked at his father as if he were a stranger. He suddenly got up and rushed out of the door like crazy. As soon as he rushed out of the door, he saw Su Chan, who had heard the noise not far away, looking at him curiously. With this look, Shen Yu suddenly felt that the place where his cheek had been slapped was even more painful. He instantly remembered the scene when he had pursued Su Chan in Shantang, Dongwu City. At that time he had been a rich young master. Wasn't it easy for him to pursue such a little girl? But now, his father had spent 700 million yuan to please this little girl's boyfriend, and his father had slapped him in the face in the presence of outsiders and scolded him loudly because of Li Jiandong. Was there anything more shameful than this in the world? In an instant, Shen Yu felt that Su Chan's eyes were full of sarcasm and mockery. He was ashamed and angry. With a shout, he rushed out like an injured beast. No matter how Li Shaoxian shouted his name behind him, he did not look back. Xinyu drove his car crazily to the bar he frequented on weekdays and drank crazily. Because he was dressed in famous brands and had the aura of a rich young master, he immediately attracted beautiful women. However, as soon as the beautiful woman sat down and tried to get close to him, Xinyu roared at her, "Get out of here! Who asked you to sit down?" The beautiful woman was frightened by him and immediately ran away in a panic. But as soon as she left, another person sat down in her seat. Xinyu turned his head and was about to scold her when he saw a man in a camouflage vest smiling at him. "Young Master Xin, what are you so unhappy about?" As he spoke, 3 people came over and sat down separately. One of them laughed and said, "Do you still need to ask? It must be a woman." This man was the security guard of the Dongxing building, Gangzi, who had once had a conflict with Li Yundong and several of his accomplices. They were half black and half white, and they were both black and white. They could be regarded as the #1 figure in Tianan City. Xinyu often hung out with some shady people, so the two sides had some friendship. As soon as Xinyu saw Gangzi, he didn't say any more evil words. He just drank the wine in silence. A security guard next to him knew that Xinyu was a real rich man. He was an idiot who spent money extravagantly. He laughed and said, "Young Master Xin, if you're in a bad mood, just say it. Which guy offended you? We'll help you vent your anger." Xinyu turned his head and looked at him. He suddenly thought of Li Yundong's background and Li Yundong's superhuman ability and strength. His face became even gloomier. He didn't say anything and drank even more fiercely. He was not a good drinker. After drinking a few glasses of wine, the smell of alcohol immediately went to his head, and he dared to shout some words that he didn't dare to say. Xinyu shouted drunkenly, "Su-chan, you b****, little b****, what's wrong with me? Why don't I deserve you? Why do you like him and not me?" When the security guards heard this, they looked at each other. The security guard who had spoken before laughed and said, "Sure enough, it's a woman. Young Master Xin, don't worry. Isn't a woman like that?" Our Gangzi was also in a bad mood because of a woman the other day. Xinyu said loudly, She's different. I can't live without her." Gangzi glared at him, turned his head to Xinyu and said maliciously, "Young Master Xin, since you like her so much, then we'll help you think of a way to get rid of her? What do you think?" When Xinyu heard this, his eyes suddenly turned red. As the saying goes, alcohol strengthens the courage of a coward. Gangzi's words immediately made him more and more bold. Xinyu gritted his teeth and fiercely said a few words, "Well, I want to force myself on you. Well, today's update is very late. Sorry, but for the sake of the more than 9,000 words in the 2 chapters, please don't scold me too much. Thank you." Chapter 657. Xinyu didn't know how much his drunken words had changed his fate, nor did he know how terrible a disaster his words had brought to the Xin family. After Xinyu finished speaking, the security guards next to him were overjoyed. Naturally, they knew that if they worked for young Master Xin, they would be greatly rewarded after the job was done. As for which girl they had slept with and whose body they had ruined, it had nothing to do with them at all. This wasn't the first time they had done something like this. Some young ladies didn't dare to speak up after being gang-raped, while some of the more hot-tempered ones would be intimidated by them, and their families would all give up, not daring to forcefully stand up for them. The few men who were full of evil ideas were discussing countermeasures with evil smiles on their faces. They had no idea what kind of terrifying monster they were facing. After a group of people discussed in the bar, Xinyu filled the glass in front of him and said with red eyes, "Come on, let's drink up. If it's done, I promise I won't treat you badly." The security guards laughed, clinked their glasses and drank up the wine in them. Then they stood up together and said loudly, "Let's go and do something." Xinyu led the crowd out of the bar aggressively, looking domineering and extremely arrogant. But as soon as he walked out of the bar, a cold wind suddenly blew, and Xinyu shivered for no reason. It was already late at night, and the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. There was a cool breeze outside, and the bustling streets of the city were busy with people coming and going. Xinyu felt cold all over for a moment in this steel city, and the drunkenness he had felt before had dissipated a lot. As soon as the smell of alcohol disappeared, he immediately regretted it. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that once he slept with Su-chan, Li Jiandong would definitely get angry. Once Li Jiandong got angry, would his father be on his side? If this had happened in the past, Xinyu would have done it without hesitation, because he knew that no matter how big the trouble he caused, his father would take care of it for him. After all, he was the only son in the family. If his father didn't side with him, who would? But now Xinyu couldn't help but hesitate. His father was now a little unreasonable, spending 700 million to please him for an outsider. This was simply unimaginable. Gangzi and the other security guards saw Xinyu standing in the same place after leaving the bar. They couldn't help but look at each other. Gangzi asked, "Young Master Shen, what's wrong?" Xinyu's eyes flickered as he said, "No, nothing." Gangzi had some understanding of this young master of the Shen family. He deliberately took out a small plastic bag from his pocket. The plastic bag contained a few small blue pills. He said, "Young Master Shen, are you afraid? You're the dignified young master of the Shen family, yet you want to have sex with a little girl, yet you're still thinking about it?" Xinyu was provoked by him and immediately remembered his humiliation. He was so angry that he grabbed the small plastic bag and said stiffly, "Who said I'm afraid?" Gangzi laughed. "Then let's go." Xinyu said angrily, "Let's go then." A group of people swaggered into the car and went straight to Xinyu's home. When Xinyu arrived home, he gave a few instructions to several security guards, and then entered the house himself. It was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. Most of the Shen family members had entered their rooms. Ziyuan, Zhou Qin and Su Chan, who were guests of the Shen family, stayed in their own rooms. Zhou Qin and Ziyuan were meditating, while Su Chan was lying on the bed, pressing the remote control with her hand and watching soap operas in boredom. After Xinyu entered the house, he greeted the servants and went to the kitchen. He walked to the kitchen, looked around and thought to himself, "What will she eat? What? Snacks? By the way, she once participated in the tea art competition. She will definitely drink our top-grade Longjing tea." Thinking of this, Xinyu immediately took action. But when he made a cup of tea and was about to bring it to Su Chan, he thought, "No, if I bring it to her, whether she will drink it or not is also a problem. It's better to let housekeeper Zhang bring it to her." Yes, that's it. As soon as he opened his mouth and was about to call someone, he suddenly thought, "Wait. Steward Zhang will definitely wonder why I didn't bring tea to anyone else, but to Su Chan? If he lets it slip, won't it ruin my plan?" Thinking of this, Xinyu coughed dryly, called Steward Zhang over and said seriously, "Old Zhang, it's getting late. Prepare a midnight snack for everyone." Although Steward Zhang had seen his young master being severely taught a lesson by the old master today, he didn't mean to neglect him at all. After all, no matter how much he was beaten and scolded, he was still Shen Wansai's son. Steward Zhang smiled and said, "Young master, if the old master knew that you had such thoughts, he would be very happy." Xinyu smiled coldly. "If he doesn't hit me, I'll burn incense in thanks." Steward Zhang muttered under his breath, but his hands were still working quickly. Young master, it's not that I want to criticize you, but it's not the first time you've heard of master's temper. Don't go against him. Can't you just go along with him a little?" Xinyu became impatient and urged, I know. Hurry up." Steward Zhang nodded quickly. After a while, he prepared a midnight snack for everyone. Just as he was about to call someone to deliver it, Xinyu said, "You can deliver it yourself, one by one. Don't tell her that I asked you to prepare it. In addition..." He put the Longjing tea he had made on a plate and said, "Give this to Miss Su Chan, and don't tell her that I prepared it for her." Steward Zhang glanced at Xinyu. He naturally knew that his young master had been thinking about this girl since he came back from Dongwu City last time. But last time he had seen with his own eyes how intimate Su Chan and Li Yundong were. She was obviously already taken, but his young master didn't give up. Alas, he didn't even know how to persuade him. Steward Zhang sighed and reached out to take Su Chan's plate. Only then did Xinyu remember that he hadn't put in his medicine yet. He quickly stopped him and said, "You go to Dad's first and then this?" Steward Zhang was stunned. He couldn't help but look at his young master with a smile of relief on his face. "At least you have some conscience." Xinyu's eyes flickered as he said, Go. Steward Zhang didn't know that it was a trick, so he took the plate and went to Shen Wansai's room. After seeing him leave, Xinyu quickly took out a small plastic bag from his arms and put one of the pills in it. But after he put one down, he felt that it was not safe, so he put another one in. But after putting two in, he couldn't help but grit his teeth and put all the small pills in the bag. Fortunately, the color of Longjing tea itself was dark green, and the fragrance was extremely pungent. After the pill was put in, it quickly dissolved and nothing unusual could be seen or smelled. Not long after Xinyu put the medicine in, he saw Steward Zhang come back. He watched Steward Zhang send the midnight snacks to each room one by one. Finally, when he sent Su Chan's plate into the room, he breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, Su Chan heard a knock on the door. She replied casually, "Come in." Steward Zhang walked in with a plate. Su Chan looked at him curiously and asked, "What's the matter?" Steward Zhang smiled slightly and said, "This is a midnight snack for Miss Su Chan." When Su Chan heard that there was food, she immediately beamed with joy and looked at the plate with a smile. She saw a cup of tea, a plate of snacks, and a plate of fruit salad on the plate. She was overjoyed and was about to reach for the food when she suddenly thought of something. She raised her head suspiciously and asked, "Why do you want to send me a midnight snack at this time? Where's Sister Ziyuan? Where's Sister Zhou Qin?" Steward Zhang smiled and said, "They all have it. I just sent it to them." Su Chan asked curiously, "Aren't they practicing?" Housekeeper Zhang exclaimed, "So they are practicing martial arts? I was wondering why they were sitting cross-legged on the ground. No wonder, it turns out that they are cultivators. You can't judge a book by its cover." Su Chan was relieved to see that Ziyuan and Zhou Qin also had it. She smiled and said to Steward Zhang, "Thank you. You can go out first. I want to eat." Steward Zhang chuckled, bent over and left. After he left, Su Chan couldn't wait to reach out and grab the food on the plate. She ate the desserts and fruit salad in a few bites. After eating, she felt that it wasn't enough, so she grabbed the Longjing tea on the side and poured the tea into her mouth with a gulp. As soon as she drank the tea, Su Chan was stunned and thought to herself, "Why does this tea taste strange?" Soon, Su Chan felt a heat in her body. She couldn't help but be shocked and thought to herself, "What's going on? Is the tea poisoned?" Su Chan's face changed and she didn't even dare to shout. She was afraid that if she shouted, it would agitate the qi and blood in her body and make her even more poisoned. She immediately sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. However, the medicinal power of this small blue pill was extremely fierce. One pill was enough to turn a brave woman into a zombie, not to mention that Xinyu had put a small bag in it. After a while, Su Chan's qi and blood were in a mess due to the fierce medicinal power of the cultivation method. Her brain was burned and she soon fell into a coma. Not long after she fell into a coma, Xinyu came to the door of her room and knocked softly. After a few attempts, he pushed the door open and saw that Su Chan was lying on the bed. Her face was frighteningly red. It was obvious that she had passed out. Xinyu was overjoyed. He immediately looked outside only to see that there was no one in the living room. He quickly picked up Su Chan and walked to the backyard of his villa. He picked up his cell phone and dialed a number. As soon as the number got through, he immediately hung up. Not long after, two burly men jumped into his backyard. When the two men saw Su Chan, they immediately laughed and said, "She's really beautiful. Young Master Shin has good eyesight." Xinyu was scared to death to do such a shameful thing in his own house. He hurriedly urged, "Hurry up, there are cameras in my backyard and at the front door. Hurry up and take people over the wall. Be careful not to be photographed." The security guard laughed and said, "Don't worry. We stole a car and are hiding." The two of them carried Su Chan over the wall and quickly left. After seeing them leave, Xinyu took a deep breath and calmed his breathing a little. Then he pretended to be calm and went straight to the place where they had agreed to meet. At this time, Zhou Qin, who was cultivating in the room, slowly woke up after meditating for a while. However, after waking up, she suddenly felt that Su Chan's aura was no longer in the Shin family's villa. She couldn't help but be stunned and look at Su Chan's room in confusion. However, she also knew that it was not good for her to interfere with Su Chan's freedom. She just wondered why Su Chan had left without telling them. Zhou Qin was stunned for a while and shook her head. She didn't want to care about this matter, but not long after she closed her eyes, she felt a palpitation in her heart for no reason. She suddenly opened her eyes, stood up and walked to Ziyuan's room. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Ziyuan standing at the door, looking like she was going out. Zhou Qin was stunned and said, "Ziyuan, are you going out too?" "Going out too? What do you mean by going out too?" Ziyuan frowned slightly. She glanced at Su Chan's room and asked, "Did you let Su Chan go out?" Zhou Qin was stunned and said, "No, I was about to ask you. I thought you were the one who asked Su Chan to go out." Ziyuan frowned slightly and complained in a low voice, "How can this girl run around alone at this time?" Zhou Qin said softly, "Maybe she has her own things to do? I believe she is not the kind of person who doesn't know how to behave." Ziyuan nodded slightly and said, "Maybe." Just as she was about to speak, she saw the door of a room not far away creak open. Shen Wankai came out with a slight smile on his face. Ziyuan Fairy, Miss Zhou Qin, it's so late. Why haven't you slept yet? Ziyuan smiled slightly and nodded politely to Shen Wankai. Mr. Shen, you haven't slept yet? Shen Wankai sighed softly. He stood in the corridor on the second floor, patted the railing with his hand and sighed. Sorry for what happened today. I'm really ashamed of my son for not being able to discipline him well. Zhou Qin said, Mr. Shen, don't say that. Isn't Shen Hui very reasonable? Shen Wankai smiled and said, unfortunately, she is a girl. Zhou Qin raised her eyebrows and said, what's wrong with girls? Even in the cultivation world, which values men more than women, even if they all say that men have 7 treasures and women have 5, there are still so many great female cultivators, aren't there? Even the cultivation world is like this, let alone the business world. Shen Wankai looked at Zhou Qin in surprise. This was the first time he had seen Zhou Qin reveal her identity in front of him. For a moment, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Miss Zhou Qin, you are indeed the descendant of a famous family. You are very knowledgeable. You are right. Sometimes I tolerate this unfilial son again and again just because as a father, I hope that one day my son can change his mind and become a prodigal son. At this time, Ziyuan smiled gently and said, Mr. Shen's painstaking efforts can be seen by God. I believe that Shen will feel it one day. As soon as she finished speaking, she heard Shen Wansai's cell phone suddenly ring. Shen Wankai apologized to Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, turned around and took out his cell phone. He glanced at it and saw that it was a call from his son, Shen Yu. He frowned slightly, hesitated for a moment and then picked up the phone. As soon as he picked up the phone, he heard a terrified and heart-wrenching voice. Help, Dad, help me. Shen Wankai was shocked. You're? What's wrong? What's going on? Both Ziyuan and Zhou Qin heard the cry for help, and they all took a step forward. They only heard Shen Yu's voice on the other end of the phone shouting hysterically, Monster, Dad, there's a monster. Help me. Chapter 658. When Shen Wankai heard Shen Yu's cry for help, he was shocked and quickly asked, what happened? Tell me quickly. Where are you? Shen Yu shouted, I'm in room 502 of the Xinyuan Hotel. Dad, come here quickly. Before he could finish his words, there was a busy tone coming from the phone. Although Shen Wankai usually beat and scolded Shen Yu, blood was thicker than water after all. He hurriedly rushed downstairs and shouted at housekeeper Zhang, who had heard the noise and rushed out, Old Zhang, get the car ready, get the car ready. Zhou Qin and Ziyuan looked at each other and saw a trace of surprise in each other's eyes. Zhou Qin whispered, something's wrong. How could Shen Yu meet a monster? Is he hallucinating or? Ziyuan frowned and said in a low voice, it can't be such a coincidence. Su Chan left before and now he said he met a monster? As they spoke, their eyes suddenly met, and they said in horror at the same time, oh no. Su Chan has shown his real body. Zhou Qin and Ziyuan naturally knew what it would mean if Su Chan showed his real body in the busy city. The two of them were so shocked that their hearts were about to jump out of their chests. Ziyuan was frightened and Zhou Qin's face was livid. She quickly turned to Chen Wankai and said, Mr. Shen, I'm sorry. After that, she grabbed Chen Wansai's collar and nodded to Ziyuan. The two of them instantly turned into a beam of blue light and flew out. Before Chen Wankai could react, he felt his body become light and he flew up lightly. For a moment, he could only hear the sound of the wind whistling in his ears. His skin felt as if it had been cut back and forth by thousands of knives, and the strong wind made his skin hurt. Shen Wankai wanted to open his eyes, but the strong wind made it impossible for him to do so. But not long after, he suddenly heard the sound of glass shattering. His feet suddenly sank and in an instant he stood on the ground again. Only then did Chen Wankai feel that all his internal organs had fallen back into his stomach. When he opened his eyes to take a look, he was so scared that his internal organs were about to pop out of his chest in an instant. In this spacious hotel room there was a fiery red fox. This fox was so huge that her whole body almost occupied the room. She was covered in blood, and there were 2 corpses lying at her feet. One had been trampled into pieces and could no longer be seen. One could only vaguely see that he was wearing a camouflage vest when he was alive. The other had half of his body bitten off, and his internal organs and green intestines were scattered on the ground. At this time, the balcony window was open and the night wind blew in. For a moment, the room was filled with a pungent smell of blood in the room, making Chen Wankai feel sick. However, the most terrifying thing was not this, but the fact that this fox with fiery red fur had 7 incomparably huge tails. Among these 7 tails, one was golden and there was a person wrapped in it. Only the head was exposed, but blood was flowing out of all 7 orifices. It was obvious that the huge force of the tail had crushed all the blood vessels in his body to death. The fox was holding a person in her mouth. She glared angrily at a man curled up in the corner, opening her mouth and biting the man bit by bit. Chen Wankai was so scared by the scene in front of him that he almost fainted. He staggered and fell to the ground. He supported himself with his hands and suddenly felt that his hands were slippery. When he raised them, he saw that they were covered in blood. Zhou Qin and Ziyuan were also frightened by the scene in front of them. Ziyuan immediately turned her head and shouted at Zhou Qin, "Go to the door and block the others. I'll deal with this." Without saying a word, Zhou Qin rushed out and blocked the door like a door god. She stared at every busybody who wanted to see what was going on in the room. Those who got a little closer were thrown far away by her like chickens. Ziyuan glanced at the man hiding in the corner and found that it was Xinyu. She walked up to the 7-tailed fox and said in a deep voice, "Suchan, calm down. What happened?" Suchan? Chen Wansai's mind was buzzing, but he suddenly heard such a sentence. He raised his head abruptly and looked at the terrifying 7-tailed fox with his mouth agape. She is Suchan? Xinyu, who was curled up in the corner, suddenly heard Chen Wansai's voice. He raised his head and his face showed ecstasy. He rolled and crawled toward Chen Wankai. The room was soaked in blood. As soon as Xinyu crawled, he immediately turned into a bloody man. He threw himself into Chen Wansai's arms and cried loudly, "Dad, help me!" Chen Wankai was also frightened to the point of losing control. He was shocked, scared, and flustered. He patted Xinyu on the back and said, don't worry, Dad is here." "What happened? Why are you here? Why is Suchan here? How did she become like this?" There was a flash of panic in Xinyu's eyes. He wailed and said, "I don't know. She asked me to come here and said she had something to do with me. Who would have thought that she was a monster? She became like this when she came in." As soon as he finished speaking, Suchan, who had transformed into her real body, suddenly glared at Xinyu and roared furiously. "Howl?" This roar immediately shattered all the glass in the room. Chen Wankai and Xinyu's eardrums were almost broken. They covered their ears at the same time, their faces full of pain. Ziyuan quickly threw out a talisman and stuck it on Suchan's body. She turned her head and shouted angrily at Xinyu, "You're lying. Why would Suchan look for you? She is a good girl who is kind to others and can't even bear to trample ants to death. How could she do evil? You must have done something to provoke her." How could Xinyu be willing to tell his father what he had done? He braced himself and cried loudly, "But she is a monster. When a monster is fierce, there is no reason to talk about it. How can there be a good monster?" At first, Ziyuan also thought the same as Xinyu, humans and demons can't coexist. A demon is a demon and there is no good monster. However, the longer she spent with Suchan, the more she liked this innocent and lovely little fox spirit. Especially the sincere feelings between her and Li Yundong, she was deeply moved. At this time, when she suddenly heard Xinyu's words, Ziyuan was furious. She roared in an extremely rare manner, "How dare you say that she is a demon? I think you are a demon but she is not." Xinyu was greatly frightened. At this time, his nerves had already fallen into a state of madness. He waved his arms and shouted, "Look at my appearance and then look at her appearance. Who is a demon and who is a human? Do you still need to ask?" Ziyuan roared angrily, "She is just a fox spirit, but she has a kinder heart than anyone else. You are wearing a human skin but you have the dirtiest heart in the world. Do you think I won't know if you don't tell me?" Ziyuan pointed at Suchan and roared angrily, "Do you know what her cultivation quotient is? She is a 7-tailed fox spirit. She can easily destroy your whole family. If she wants to make trouble for you, would she bring you to this place? Do you know how careful and cautious she is when she hides her tracks in the secular world? Only when she spits out her internal organs to heal, or when her chi and blood are boiling uncontrollably will she be forced to show her true body. For a fox spirit, revealing her true body in the secular world for others to find out is a fatal disaster. Would she be so stupid as to bring about her own destruction?" Ziyuan was trembling all over, as if she was using all her strength to restrain herself. Her hands were trembling and she couldn't wait to slap Xinyu on the head. she said in a trembling voice. Tell me, what did you do to her to make her show her true body? Tell me quickly. Otherwise, if the seven-tailed fox spirit goes crazy, I won't be able to save you. As if to answer Ziyuan's words, Su Chan, who had turned into a seven-tailed fox spirit, glared at Xinyu with fire in her eyes. She bared her teeth and her mouth was full of blood. She looked extremely ferocious. Xinyu was so scared that he shivered. He was stunned for a while, then suddenly pointed to the broken body on the ground and shouted in a hoarse voice, "It's them. They wanted to drug Su Chan and do it with her. I wanted to stop them but I couldn't." Xinyu looked at Ziyuan's angry eyes and hurriedly shouted in panic, "Su Chan is fine. She was brought in by these bastards and turned into a demon. We didn't touch her at all." Ziyuan sneered angrily and said, "Do you think you can take advantage of her? You must be tired of living. If you want to stop them, then why are you with them? Why did they make trouble for Su Chan? Humph, you don't even know how to make up lies." I'm not lying, I didn't." Xinyu looked at the horrified Su Chan and then at the angry Ziyuan. He panicked and turned to Shen Wankai, shouting at the top of his voice, "Dad, save me. I really didn't do it. I didn't do it. I swear. You must save me." At this time, how could Shen Wankai not understand what had happened? He knew his useless son too well. As the saying goes, no one knows a son better than his father. When Xinyu appeared here, Shen Wankai had already guessed some clues. At this time, hearing what he said, his heart was like a mirror. Shen Wankai smiled sadly. He didn't even look at Xinyu. Instead, he stared at Ziyuan and said in a trembling voice, "It turns out that there are not only immortals in this world, but also monsters." Ziyuan's face was livid. She snorted angrily and didn't say a word. She turned her head and floated up. She pressed her hand on Su Chan's forehead and mobilized her purest Jinqi to help Su Chan slowly suppress her boiling qi and blood. Shen Wankai watched Su Chan slowly turn from a terrifying seven-tailed fox into a petite and beautiful girl who was curled up into a ball. He smiled bitterly and said, "I really didn't expect that the thing I dreamed of most in my life, the immortal I dreamed of most, would appear in such a form." Shen Wankai slowly struggled to stand up from the pool of blood. He asked with a bitter smile, "Ziyuan immortal, is it true that seeing a seven-tailed fox will lead to the destruction of the whole family?" Ziyuan stared at Xinyu, and a rare trace of murderous aura flashed between her eyebrows. She gritted her teeth and said, "Then you should ask your precious son, and then ask Su Chan. Also, don't blame me for not reminding you. If Li Yundong finds out about what happened tonight, your whole family will be in danger." This sentence scared Shen Wankai and Xinyu so much that they trembled. Xinyu said in a hoarse voice, "Who does he think he is? Isn't he afraid of legal sanctions and retribution for destroying the whole family?" Shen Wankai also said in a trembling voice, young Master Li he won't?" Ziyuan said sternly, "He won't? No matter how rich your Shen family is, can you be more powerful than the He family? Do you know how young Master He died? No matter how arrogant you are, can you be more arrogant than young Master He? Even young Master He was killed by Li Yundong, let alone you, Xinyu. Do you know what kind of person Li Yundong is? He seems to be gentle and approachable, but if you touch his reverse scale, he will definitely fight you to the death. Do you know what it means to be angry for a beauty? Do you know what Li Yundong has done for Su Chan?" Ziyuan saw that the father and son had already seen Su Chan's real body, and many things had been torn apart, so she simply revealed some of the shameful things. This fairy, who was usually elegant and modest, was furious, and her power was really shocking. Although there were many frightening words in her words, Xinyu and Shen Wankai did not dare to disbelieve her, especially Shen Wankai. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck his mind, and he suddenly said, "It turns out that young Master He was really killed by Li Jiandong." The people in the upper echelons of Tianan City naturally knew something about young Master He's death. Many of them had guessed that young Master He's death had a great relationship with Li Yundong, but no one had guessed that young Master He had been killed by Li Yundong. He actually dared to attract lightning to kill the son of a high-ranking official. Was there anything in the world that he didn't dare to do? Shen Wankai had been in the business world for half of his life. He was used to all kinds of storms and dangers, but at this time he was suddenly scared to the point of shivering, and all the hair on his body suddenly stood on end. He suddenly realized a problem. Since Ziyuan has told me such an important thing, what does it mean? Shen Wankai looked at Ziyuan in despair. A terrible thought flashed through his mind. Does she want to kill me or even destroy my whole family? Chapter 659. The thought that flashed through Chen Wansai's mind made him shudder. This man, who had been in the business world for half of his life, had seen all kinds of conspiracies and sinister scenes, could not help but feel a deep fear in his heart when facing a young woman who was much younger than him. For a rich man like Chen Wankai, such a terrible thing as the destruction of his family was something he had never dreamed of. Especially for a rich man like him, who had started from scratch, what he wanted most was to live longer, to work harder and more solid for his foundation and country, so that his branches and leaves could spread more widely. But now, everything seemed to have been destroyed, because he had given birth to a good-for-nothing son. Wealth could not last for 3 generations. Was this really the curse of the rich? But he was only the 2nd generation. Was he going to die as the 2nd generation of the Qin family? No, there must be a way, there must be a chance. Chen Wankai shivered and stared at Ziyuan, as if he wanted to find some clues from her expression. However, Ziyuan's eyes were as cold as water, and he couldn't see anything unusual. Xinyu, who was standing to one side, also noticed the terrible killing intent. He grabbed Chen Wankai and shouted in horror, "Dad, don't be afraid. She's threatening us, threatening us. What era is this? How can there be such a thing as extermination?" As he said this, he shouted at Ziyuan in a threatening manner, "Are you crazy? The extermination of a family is a capital crime. No one can save you." Ziyuan didn't even look at him. She said coldly, "You should think about how to save yourself first." Chen Wankai turned his face and looked at his son with tears streaming down his face. He said in a trembling voice, "It's my fault. I didn't teach you well when you were young. It's my fault." Xinyu looked at his father in horror and shouted, "Dad, what did you say? We don't have to be afraid of them. I don't believe they dare to destroy our Shin family. There are also people above us." Shin Wankai didn't seem to hear what he said. He hugged his son tightly as if this was the last time he would hug him. After letting go of Xinyu, he turned around and wiped his tears. The expression on his face slowly returned to normal, as if in an instant, he had returned to the powerful and ambitious man in the business world. Chen Wankai calmly said to Ziyuan, "Ziyuan Immortal, I will give you an explanation. However, can you come back to my house first? It's really not convenient here." Ziyuan walked over to the unconscious Su Chan and gently covered her with her 9th heaven Ziyuan silk. Then she took out a talisman from her bosom, pinched her fingers and shouted to the door, "Zhou Qin, take care of the follow-up here." Zhou Qin's voice came from outside the door. "Don't worry, leave it to me." Ziyuan nodded and grabbed the collars of Chen Wankai and Xinyu with both hands. Her figure flashed and turned into a green light. When Chen Wankai and Xinyu opened their eyes again, they found that they had returned to the Shin family's villa. It had only been more than 10 minutes since they had come and gone. At this time, the Shin family's villa was in a mess. The 2nd wife, the 3rd wife, and the 4th wife were so anxious that they were pacing around in the living room. Just as they were panicking, Shin Wankai and Xinyu suddenly appeared in front of them. Beside them stood Ziyuan and Su Chan, whose whole body was wrapped in purple silk. The 4th concubine, Li Shaoxian, saw her son covered in blood and looked as if he had been greatly frightened. Her heart suddenly trembled. She immediately rushed to Xinyu and said in a trembling voice, What happened? How did you end up like this?" The 3rd concubine, Auntie Zheng, rushed to Chen Wankai with concern and said, "Old man, where are you hurt? Why is there so much blood? Zhang, hurry up, call an ambulance." Chen Wankai raised his hand and stopped housekeeper Zhang from making a phone call. He said in a hoarse voice, "It's okay. It's not my blood." Li Shaoxian was shocked and frantically searched Xinyu's body. "Is it yours? What happened to you? Where are you hurt?" Xinyu looked at his father in horror, and then moved his eyes to Ziyuan. He said in a trembling voice, "Mom, someone wants to kill us. Call the police, call the police." Li Shaoxian was shocked and raised her head abruptly. "Oh, who has the guts?" Chen Wankai laughed. The terror of his laughter made those who were familiar with him feel creepy. He turned his face and said to housekeeper Zhang, "Zhang, close all the doors and forbid anyone from entering or leaving. Also, go and get a knife." When everyone in the Shin family saw Chen Wankai laughing, they felt goosebumps all over their bodies. When they heard his last words, they were so scared that their hair stood on end. Auntie Zheng grabbed Chen Wankai and said in surprise, "Old man, what are you doing with a knife?" Chen Wankai turned his face and stared at her coldly and terrifyingly. He said coldly, "Let go." Auntie Zheng trembled under his gaze. She was speechless. Housekeeper Zhang was also frightened. He stood there and didn't know what to do. Qin Wankai glared at him and shouted angrily, Zhang, how many years have you been with me? Do I have to repeat myself a second time? If you don't want to go, I'll go by myself. Housekeeper Zhang was so scared that he quickly went back to the kitchen. After a while he came back with a fruit knife. Qin Wankai kicked him without looking at it. Do you want to die? Why are you using such a small knife? Housekeeper Zhang was kicked by him and quickly crawled into the kitchen. This time, he took a kitchen knife and handed it to Qin Wankai with a frightened expression. He said in a trembling voice, Master, calm down. What's so serious that you need to use a knife? Qin Wankai held the kitchen knife in his hand, weighed it in his hand and rubbed the blade with his thumb. He laughed strangely and said, Good, it's very sharp. What a good butcher's knife. As he said this, he turned his face and said lightly to Xinyu, Give me your hand. This sentence was like a clap of thunder, scaring all the Shen family members. Li Shaoxian looked at Qin Wankai in disbelief. Old Shen, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Although Lao San had always been at odds with Lao Si, especially because he was jealous of her having a son, Qin Wansai's behavior was too abnormal and strange. She was so scared that she hugged Qin Wansai's arm and shouted, Old master, he is your son. Mrs. Ma, the second oldest, was so scared that she grabbed the Buddha beads in front of her chest with both hands and kept turning them, chanting scriptures in a trembling voice. Xinyu stared at his father with wide eyes and shouted, Dad, are you crazy? I didn't do anything wrong. What are you going to do? Qin Wankai laughed bitterly. You know best whether you did anything wrong or not. Now there are only two ways in front of you. I will kill all of you and then I will commit suicide. The other way is that I will cut off your evil hand and then beg Li Jiandong to let us go. Choose for yourself. Xinyu was so scared that he collapsed to the ground. Although he had thought that if this matter were to happen, the consequences might be very serious, but at most he would be slapped like before and grounded for a few months without pocket money. However, he never thought that this time it would be so serious. Li Shaoxian grabbed the kitchen knife from Qin Wansai's hand and shouted crazily, Old Shin, you are crazy. What on earth did he do that made you do such a cruel thing? Haven't you heard that tigers don't eat their cubs? Qin Wankai laughed bitterly and said, Yes, it's because tigers don't eat their cubs that I didn't kill him. What did your precious son do? Why don't you ask him yourself? Xinyu was so scared that he quickly cried to Li Shaoxian, Mom, I didn't do anything. I really didn't do anything. Help me. Li Shaoxian cried bitterly. She hugged her son and shouted, Mom believes in you. Don't be afraid. I will definitely save you. Qin Wankai suddenly became furious. He kicked Li Shaoxian in the heart and roared angrily, You saved him? I'm telling you, you are the one who hurt you. Do you know what it means to have a loving mother and a spoiled son? If you hadn't indulged him again and again, would he have become like this today? Li Shaoxian was kicked to the ground by him. For a moment she was in so much pain that she curled up into a ball and couldn't get up. She could only cry loudly. For a moment, the Shen family's villa was gloomy and murderous. Qin Wankai turned his face and glared at Xinyu with a ferocious expression. He shouted, Give me your hand. Xinyu was unwilling to do so. He quickly withdrew his hand behind his back and kept crawling backward. Qin Wankai quickly stepped forward and kicked Xinyu in the head, causing him to turn over. Then he stepped on him with one foot, grabbed his arm with one hand and waved the kitchen knife with the other. He roared, Is it this hand? Is it this hand that touched Su Chan? Xinyu was so scared that his whole body was trembling. His pants were wet in an instant. He shouted hoarsely, Mom, help me. When Li Shaoxian heard her son's cry, the pain in her body seemed to disappear in an instant. She got up and rushed toward Qin Wankai like a madman. If you dare to touch my son, I'll fight you to the death. Qin Wankai was furious. He raised his hand and slashed at Li Shaoxian's face. Li Shaoxian looked at the knife coming at her and was so scared that she was stunned on the spot. She didn't even know how to dodge. However, Qin Wansai's knife stopped at the moment it was about to cut her. The cold blade stopped at the tip of her nose. Qin Wankai gritted his teeth and said, Li Shaoxian, let me tell you, this knife of mine can not only save you, but also the lives of all the people in the Shen family. Maybe it can also save you's life. But if I don't chop down with this knife, don't regret the consequences in the future. Li Shaoxian was also a very scheming woman. She knew Qin Wankai very well. She knew that the old man of the Shen family was a real ambitious and ruthless person. He was usually gentle and elegant and looked like a human, but once he got serious he was really like an eagle looking at a wolf, iron-blooded and ruthless. Especially when it came to cutting off one's wrist and one's arm in order to survive, he would not even blink his eyelids when he did this kind of thing. If she continued to stop him, then for the sake of herself and the Shen family, Chen Wankai would definitely not care about the relationship between husband and wife at all. He would go back and kill her too. Moreover, Li Shaoxian also knew that Chen Wankai was a very sensible and astute person. If he hadn't been forced into a dead end, he would never have done such a crazy thing. Li Shaoxian gave in an instant. She covered her face and cried bitterly. She sat down on the ground and cried loudly. Seeing that his mother had given up, Xinyu was so scared that he shouted crazily and kept begging for mercy. "Mom, save me, save me." Xinyu's hysterical begging for mercy was heart-wrenching. Even Xin Hui, who had always looked down on her brother, couldn't bear it. She walked up to Ziyuan and whispered, "Sister Ziyuan, please let my brother go this time. He already knows that he's wrong. He won't dare to do it again." Ziyuan said with a cold face, "There is karma in the world, and there is retribution in heaven and earth. What if he hadn't provoked Su Chan this time, but some other girl who had no strength to fight back? Then it wouldn't have been him who would have sought death, but those girls. What would you have done to them? Who would have upheld justice for them? Who would have upheld justice for them? Tell me, if you were the one who had been insulted, what would you have done? Since you've done something wrong, you have to bear the consequences of doing something wrong." Ziyuan's words made Xin Hui speechless. She sighed softly, shook her head and retreated to the side. Xin Yu's face was twisted with fear. He shouted at Li Shaoxian, "Mom, save me." Li Shaoxian's heart was broken by his shout. She raised her head with tears streaming down her face. She stroked her son's face, which was distorted by fear, and said in a trembling voice, It's okay. It'll be fine in a while. It'll be fine in a while." Xinyu was so frightened by Li Shaoxian that his expression was dull. "Mom, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?" Shin Wankai raised his head and laughed. He said in a hoarse voice, "There is karma in the world, and there is retribution in heaven and earth." Well said, well said. Why didn't I hear such words before? Why didn't anyone tell me earlier? After that, he roared and raised the steel knife in his hand high. The blade was cold and suddenly chopped down. Chapter 660. Shin Wankai raised the knife in his hand and fell. With a crack, Shin Yu's arm was immediately cut into 2 pieces. Blood sprayed everywhere and splashed on Shin Wankai's ferocious face. Shin Yu roared in pain and fell to the ground, trembling all over. Seeing this bloody scene, Li Shaoxian fainted without saying a word. Shin Hui was so scared that she hid in her mother's arms. The third concubine was also so scared that she trembled all over. She held Shin Hui and turned her back, not daring to look again. The second concubine closed her eyes and quickly recited the Buddhist scriptures with a frightened expression. She didn't dare to take another look. After Shin Wankai raised the knife in his hand, he pointed at Shin Yu with the bloody knife and said in a hoarse voice, "From now on, you are no longer a member of the Shin family. Go." Shin Yu covered his broken arm. He kept rolling on the ground in pain, screaming. His face was smeared with tears and snot mixed with his own blood. But after rolling for a while, he suddenly stood up shakily. He stared at Li Shaoxian and his father with red eyes and roared, I hate you, I hate you." After saying that, he stumbled and rushed out. Steward Zhang, who had been scared stiff, subconsciously wanted to stop him, but Shin Wankai immediately shouted, "Old Zhang, let him go. Whether he lives or dies in the future, leave it to God to decide. I'll pretend that I never had a son like him." Steward Zhang's face was also full of tears. "Master, he is your son?" Shin Wankai was unmoved. He turned his face, threw down the kitchen knife, and knelt down in front of Ziyuan with a thud. He presented Shin Yu's broken arm to her with both hands and said in a trembling voice, "Can this dispel young Master Li's anger?" Ziyuan's face was expressionless. After a long while, she nodded slowly. Shin Wankai suddenly felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked away in an instant. His body softened and his hands propped up on the ground. His face showed a rare look of sadness and love. He looked at Shin Yu's leaving figure and said in a trembling voice, Don't blame me. Dad did it for your own good. My father used to be very strict with me. He often beat and scolded me, which made me very painful. So I swore a long time ago that if I had a son, I would treat him well and not beat or scold him. But now I regret it. If I had been stricter with you when you were young, you wouldn't be like this today. It's all my fault, all my fault. As Shen Wankai spoke, he beat his chest with both hands and burst into tears. For a moment, the rest of the Shen family also burst into tears. Ziyuan sighed softly. Just as she was about to speak, she saw a flash of blue light at the door. Zhou Qin had returned. Zhou Qin saw that the hall of the Shen family's villa was covered in blood and everyone was crying. She couldn't help but frown and say, "What's wrong?" Ziyuan told her what had happened just now in a low voice. Zhou Qin snorted coldly and said in a low voice, "He got lucky. But why not get rid of all the evils?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "Heaven has the virtue of cherishing life. Although it was the duty of a cultivator to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, one should never truly regard oneself as the heavens. Although Xinyu was wrong, he didn't deserve to die. Losing an arm and being expelled from the family is already the greatest punishment for him. As for whether he will choose to be a good person or continue to be a bad person in the future, it will depend on his luck." Zhou Qin sighed softly and said, "What you said makes sense. It's just that I just thought of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao who were forced to death by young Master He. I can't help but feel angry." After that, Zhou Qin looked at Ziyuan strangely and said in a low voice, "By the way, I heard what you said in the hotel. Did you deliberately tell Shen Wankai about young Master He?" Ziyuan nodded slightly. "Yes, if I hadn't said it, Shen Wankai wouldn't have realized the seriousness of the matter. He might have been lucky and even turned against us. Shen Wankai has the disposition of an ambitious and ruthless person. You can see it from his decision just now. If this person can't be subdued as a friend, then we absolutely can't let him be our enemy." Zhou Qin frowned and said, "Aren't you afraid that you will force him into a dead end and fight with us like a trapped beast?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "No, Shen Wankai is a smart man. He still wants to live a long life. The moment I threw out my trump card, I told him in a subtext, either he will be our enemy and be destroyed, or he will immediately submit to us and stand on the same boat as us. As it turned out, Shen Wankai understood my intention very quickly. That was why he had to cut off his arm to save his life. Look at this broken arm. It's clearly a sign of loyalty." Although Zhou Qin had experienced several fierce battles, she still felt a little dazzling when she suddenly saw Shen Yu's broken arm. She frowned and said, "Then what should we do next? Won't the rest of the Shen family regard us as enemies?" Ziyuan said, "As long as Shen Wankai is here, they won't be able to overturn the sky. It's just that, the price Shen Wankai has paid this time is too great." Zhou Qin chuckled and said, "A strong man cuts his wrist and a lizard cuts its tail. Shen Wankai is indeed a powerful person. Amazing, amazing. He's a character." Ziyuan didn't seem to want to talk about this anymore. She turned her face away and just as her eyes fell on Su Chan, she heard her groan as if she was gradually waking up. Ziyuan and Zhou Qin were overjoyed. They quickly squatted down and asked anxiously, "Su Chan, are you awake?" Su Chan groaned in a daze, "Thirsty, so thirsty." Ziyuan immediately raised her head and said, "Water, get some water." But at this time the people of the Shen family were crying with Shen Wankai. Only housekeeper Zhang was still holding on. He wiped his tears, quickly ran to the kitchen, poured a glass of water and then brought it over. "The water is here." Ziyuan took it and brought it to Su Chan's mouth, but Su Chan reluctantly turned her face away and whispered, "The water of the Shen family is poisonous. You can't drink it." These words made the faces of the Shen family burn with shame. Ziyuan brought the tea to her mouth and took a sip under Su Chan's gaze. Then she brought it to her mouth and said softly, "Drink it. The water is not poisonous. I've tried it." Only then did Su Chan feel relieved. She opened her red lips and greedily drank all the water in the cup. After Su Chan drank this large glass of water, she kept complaining of thirst. Housekeeper Zhang poured her 8 glasses of water in a row. After Su Chan finished drinking, she felt a little better and stopped asking for water. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, was very puzzled. She asked Su Chan in a low voice, "Su Chan, what kind of poison did you get? Why did you drink so much water?" Su Chan moaned in pain, "It's so hot, my whole body is so hot." Ziyuan squatted down, pressed her fingers on Su Chan's pulse, and said in a deep voice, "It's a strong aphrodisiac." Zhou Qin asked in surprise, "A 7-tailed fox spirit will be enchanted by a strong aphrodisiac? Will ordinary poisons also work on us?" Ziyuan said with a cold face, "When cultivators cultivate their 5 internal organs, they often cultivate their liver and kidneys to be very strong. The liver is detoxifying and the kidneys are detoxifying. Therefore, we cultivators are not afraid of ordinary poisons, because our own liver and kidneys have extremely strong detoxifying and detoxifying abilities. But this kind of aphrodisiac is different from ordinary poisons. Its function is to stimulate the human body's hormones and the speed of qi and blood circulation. It can be said that it is actually a kind of enhancer and aphrodisiac. The liver and kidneys can't offset its effect. Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Fortunately, we didn't make things worse tonight. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable." Ziyuan pressed Su Chan's Shinting acupoint with her hand and slowly poured her purine qi into Su Chan's body to calm down the hot qi and blood all over her body. At the same time, she whispered to Su Chan, "Su Chan, how did you take these pills?" Su Chan struggled to open her eyes and said with difficulty, "Someone sent me a midnight snack, and then I was poisoned after eating it." Her words shocked the third concubine Auntie Zhang and she cried out, "But we all ate it. How can we be fine?" At this time, Steward Zhang's face suddenly changed. He stamped his feet and said, "Alas, I see, I see." Auntie Zhang turned to look at Steward Zhang and asked in surprise, "Old Zhang, what do you mean?" Steward Zhang wiped his tears and said, "Young master once told me to give Miss Su Chan a midnight snack with Longjing tea. He also told me not to tell her that it was from young master. I didn't think of it at that time. Alas, it's all my fault. If I had noticed it earlier, such a thing wouldn't have happened." At this time, Shen Wankai was already a little tired from crying. With the help of Shen Hui, he slowly stood up and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't say it, it's all fate." He turned his face and said to Su Chan, "Miss Su Chan, I have already driven my unfilial son out of the house. If there is anything else you are not satisfied with, please tell me. I will definitely do it." At this time, Su Chan only felt that her head was burning into paste. She groaned in pain and said, "I want to go home, I want to go home. Yindong, where are you? I'm so sad." Ziyuan quickly picked her up and coaxed her as if she were coaxing a child. "Su Chan, be good. I'll take you back now." After Ziyuan stood up, she bowed slightly to Shen Wankai to show respect and politeness. She said softly, "Mr. Shen, neither of us wanted to see what happened today, but what's done can't be undone. I hope that Mr. Shen can focus on his health and not think about other unnecessary things. As for Li Yundong, I will tell him what happened and the result. I believe that Li Yundong is also a reasonable person and will not pursue the matter any further." Shen Wankai seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. He looked old and said in a choked voice, "Ziyuan Immortal, I won't say anything unnecessary. You can do as you please. I hope that the two families will be friends in the future, not enemies." Zhou Qin sighed softly and said, "Mr. Shen, my father is right. You are indeed a great person. See you later." Shen Wankai watched the two of them leave and stood there in a daze. After a long time, he laughed strangely and said, "A great person? I cut off my own son's arm with my own hands. I'm really a great person." Shen Wankai laughed, but tears flowed down unconsciously. Third Aunt Taijin, who was standing to one side, also cried with him and said, "Old master, what should we do in the future? How should we deal with the current situation? What about Shenyu? What about Li Yundong?" Shen Wankai waved his hand weakly and slowly sat down on the sofa. His old and thin body seemed to shrink into the sofa. He said in a hoarse voice, "You all go to rest. No one is allowed to mention what happened today. As for you, none of you are allowed to look for him. Leave his fate to God." After saying that, he buried his head deep into his palms and let out a deep sigh. After the storm of the Shen family, Ziyuan and Zhou Qin returned home with Su Chan. Zhou Qin saw Ziyuan sitting by the bed and staring at Su Chan, who was sleeping soundly. There was a strange light in her eyes. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong?" "Why do you look at Su Chan a little strange?" Ziyuan turned around and said with a serious face, "When you broke the window of the hotel room with me, did you notice something?" Zhou Qin asked in confusion, "What is it?" Ziyuan's eyes flickered and fell on Su Chan. "Why is one of Su Chan's 7 tails golden?" Zhou Qin was stunned. "Golden tail? What's wrong with that?" Ziyuan said with a serious face, "Since ancient times, only the tail of the 9-tailed celestial fox is golden, and since ancient times, only the mystical silver fox has cultivated to the realm of 9 tails. So, it can be said that only the tail and fur of the mystical silver fox are golden, and the other foxes are not golden." Zhou Qin was shocked and looked at Su Chan with her mouth agape. You mean? Su Chan. Ziyuan shook her head. I'm not sure yet. Zhou Qin didn't say anything. She looked at Su Chan with shock and complexity in her eyes, and her expression changed. She didn't dare to imagine. If the innocent girl in front of her was the mystical silver fox, how would she face it? Seeing Zhou Qin's nervous expression, as if she was facing a formidable enemy, Ziyuan couldn't help laughing. Don't worry, things haven't been settled yet. Maybe Su Chan's physique is special. Besides, hasn't the mystical silver fox been released in Japan now? No matter what, she will take back the remnant soul of Chao Kefi first, and Su Chan doesn't look like the remnant soul of the mystical silver fox. As Ziyuan spoke, she slowly fell silent with Zhou Qin. The two powerful female cultivators looked at each other and saw deep worry in each other's eyes. If Su Chan was really the incarnation of the remnant soul of the mystical silver fox, what should they do? Or, even if she wasn't and she really became a nine-tailed celestial fox, what should they do? Since ancient times, the appearance of the nine-tailed celestial fox had always been a sign of great chaos. Where there was a nine-tailed celestial fox, there would be war, turmoil, disaster and suffering. If all this really came, what should they do? What should Li Jiandong do? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.